Okay, Anna Marie.
Let's come to order. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the June 19th, 2007 meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here. Councilman Draymond, I would invite you to do the flag salute.
You would place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Sunday was Father's Day, and tonight's invocation is for all our fathers. America's most famous author and one of my personal favorites is Mark Twain, born Samuel Clemens. Speaking of his father, he is quoted as saying, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years." We give thanks to the difference that 7 years can make, not in a father's education, but a young person's. As sons and daughters, let us give thanks for all that our fathers have done for us to raise us, teach us, and pass on their values and principles so that we may take our place in society as responsible citizens. We pray for all our fathers who are serving in the armed forces and were not with their families this weekend. We pray that they remain out of harm's way and are reunited with their loved ones very, very soon. Thank you and amen.
Thank you. May we have your report, Mr. Kasakian?
The agenda for the June 19, 2007 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, June 14, 2007 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And the next item.
Presentation and appointments at 3A is agenda preview for the meeting of June 6, 2007.
Ms. Beers.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for June 26th, for the Glendale Housing Authority, under the business agenda, we have the Director of Community Development and Housing regarding the affordable multifamily rental housing project located at 328 Miraloma Avenue. Also, Director of Administrative Services, this is regarding the Housing Authority budget for the fiscal year 2007-2008. For the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, we have under the business agenda, Director of Public Works, San Fernando Road Corridor Landscaping Improvement Project, Phase 3. Director of Administrative Services for the Glendale Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year 2007-2008. Director of Development Services, Embassy Suites Hotel Project located at 800 North Central Avenue. We have a joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Housing Authority, and this is regarding the issue being brought forward by the Director of Planning and Director of Community Development and Housing regarding the current status of Glendale's condominium conversion policy. For the Glendale City Council on June 26th at 6 p.m., we have a number of consent items. Fire Chief, provision of emergency medical director services for the Glendale Fire Department paramedic program. Fire Chief, receipt of grant funds for the ISIS system development and appropriation for continuing operations. Interim Director of Glendale Water and Power, furnishing all labor, equipment, and materials for custodial cleaning services. Interim Director of Glendale Water and Power, City of Glendale Voluntary Water Conservation. Director of Public Works, this is a report being brought forward regarding the school crossing guard program. City Clerk, legal advertising for the City of Glendale. Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, proposed improvements at Griffith Manor Park. And Interim Director of Glendale Water and Power, annual authority for the purchase or sale of energy services report. Under action items, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the City Manager, we're bringing the issue forward regarding Grandview Cemetery. Director of Information Services, Digital Telecommunications Carrier Circuit and Service Vendor. Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, Stengel Field, Ball Field Light Standards Replacement and Turf Renovation. Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, proposed improvements at Carr Park. Interim Director of Glendale Water and Power, increase in purchased water adjustment charge for potable water. Acting Director of Administrative Services, the adoption of the City of Glendale 2007-2008 budget. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Wow, that sounds like a full. Is it as full as it sounds? Wow. Okay, we'll look forward to that. The next item, please.
Next item is under presentations is Glendale's Great American Cleanup Day recognition.
I'd like to call up Sam Engel.
Mayor Najarian, members of the City Council, this is a busy time of year for us, and this kind of wraps up probably the last of our presentations for a while. Tonight, it's my honor and pleasure to present to you the community sponsors for our Great American Cleanup Weekend that we held on May 19th and 20th for the 19th year, making us one of the oldest community cleanups in Southern California. We predate LA Sparkle, run by the City of Los Angeles. We predate the River Cleanup, run by the LA River Conservancy. And we predate the beach cleanups held on the beaches of Southern California, run by Heal the Bay. Ours is the oldest continuing operated community cleanup program that's still in existence. Our cleanup program really has its roots in people who are very concerned about Glendale. Bob Augsburger, Gene Blankenship, Ellen Perry, Vonnie Rossman, Blanche Greenwood, and Betty Evans were part of the original group that got this original day together 19 years ago. It started with a small group of Boy Scouts, city employees, and community leaders getting together and saying, we want to clean up graffiti in our community. And they had the punchline of knock out graffiti in Glendale. From that humble beginning 19 years ago, we are up to 500 volunteers running on 2 days with people of different faiths, beliefs, able to participate in a diverse representation of our community, cleaning up and making our community better. Tonight we're recognizing the people that make those 2 days possible, because all of these programs are sponsored entirely by community organizations and not supported by taxpayer funds. We're going to be recognizing tonight different levels of sponsorships. And as I present them to you, I would like to have them, if they're here, come up and join me at the podium for presentation of their certificates by you, Mr. Mayor. So for our jewel level sponsors tonight, starting with probably one of our top sponsors and certainly one of the biggest supporters of our activities in town and the premier utility in Southern California, Glendale Water and Power, Ned Basson, representing our public outreach component of our own public utility. Our Public Works Department, we are in partnership with our Public Works Department with doing the outreach and the community cleanup. Representing our Public Works Department as a sponsor this year, Steve Zern, the Director of Public Works. From the business community, we have Johnny Harrison, who is the owner of Lexus of Glendale. And from the Glendale News Press, Tina Dunning, the advertising director. I don't know whether Tina's here tonight. Tina's not here tonight. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, these are our jewel-level sponsors of our great graffiti paint-out this year.
Wow. And it's my pleasure, on behalf of the entire council, to present these commendations. Let's start with Glendale Water and Power. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Again, you're getting to be a regular up here. Thanks. And this was for Tina as well. Okay, sign that.
Our next level of sponsorship is platinum level, and representing DreamWorks Animation SKG is Michelle Davis.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hello. Thank you.
Moving on, we have a silver level of sponsorship. David Burgart from Glendale Adventist Medical Center Foundation. Rick Bagnotti, who is president of the Glendale Association of Realtors. Shirley Tapp, who's the president and CEO of the Glendale City Employees Federal Credit Union. Dean Briggs, the president of Bayview Painting. And Elena Morales, who's the director of senior services at Glendale Memorial Hospital. All of these represent our silver level sponsors for the event this year. And our gold level sponsors here, Bill Evans from Jewel City, Kiwanis, who has been with us every one of those 19 years. Lieutenant Don Meredith, representing the Glendale Police Department. We couldn't do this event without the police department being out there helping us. Tony Navarez, who's the sales representative from our neighbor here on Broadway, Dunn Edwards Paint. Mike Shebekian, the business development manager from Fiscal Credit Union. And Elise Asai from Kaiser Permanente. These represent our gold level sponsors. They'll join me up here, and you can thank them, Mayor Najarian.
Picture with the mayor.
Mayor, did we get Kate?
Picture with the mayor.
Okay.
Crowd in.
Come on
I
in.
have a wide angle, but not that wide.
There you go. Come on in, everybody. Come on, Don.
Only two of them.
Oh, there we are.
Get in, Sam. Three of them.
Last week, Burbank High.
1, 2, 3. Great.
Thank you. I'd like everybody who's in the audience to really understand that we could not do this without our sponsors, whether they've been with us 19 years or whether they joined us this year for the first time. It is a commitment to this community that keeps us being a quality community, and it is a commitment to this community that shows what a special place Glendale is. On behalf of all of us who run the events, let's give a big round of applause for our sponsors this year.
And I'd just like to add thanks to Sam for rounding up our sponsors. And you can see the large number of sponsors that we have really is indicative of the commitment that these individuals and their organizations have to keep Glendale a beautiful, clean place to live in. So, again, congratulations to everyone.
Don't go away. While I got commendations here, I also have a staff that helps me. And I didn't call up Julie Fine, who represents Lakeside Healthcare. There she is. I think we have her.
We have yours. I told Sam not to forget you.
He told me. He reminded me.
Kaiser just arrived.
Get him up here. We have Kaiser Permanente, who just arrived. Elise Asai. Elise, could you come up here? You're here.
Thank you.
Hey, that's a good trick. It's like going to a party.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. What's the next item, please?
Next item is City Council and staff comments.
And I do have a card from a staff member, John Fitzgerald. Is Fitz here? Okay. Well, if he comes in, we'll give him another shot. Let's go to my colleagues. Mr. Draymond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple of things. One is I was contacted by residents and a homeowners association of a condominium complex in Glendale. Happens to be the building in which I live. And no, they didn't contact me to say get out of town or please leave. They had a question. Apparently, when the city created the rebate program for appliances, electrical efficiency, and so on, apparently if you're an apartment complex owner in the city of Glendale, and you have air conditioning units there that you own, you qualify for certain kinds of rebates related to replacing those with more efficient units. And if you're a homeowner, likewise. But if it's a condominium association where the homeowners association actually owns the units, in this case it's an 111-unit building where the units are actually owned by the homeowners association, you're not included. So actually the homeowners in that case are penalized. They're the only group that is left out. Apparently there was a little, no one realized it. No one thought about it. But there are a number of buildings, number of complexes like that in the city that represent hundreds and hundreds of units. And I'd like to look into that to see whether they would be able to be included in that program, these associations.
Staff's taking notes.
We'll bring you back a report.
Thank you. Another issue has to do with, Mr. Mayor, design review. And I think you know where I'm probably headed with this. I had an opportunity to meet with our Director of Planning, Hassan Haghani, and our Mayor, Mayor Najarian. It's my opinion, and I think that I am not alone, that we have some serious problems with our design review process. And I say that not because it doesn't take a genius. I'm hearing this from residents, I'm hearing this from the building trade, I'm hearing this from the development community, from a lot of different avenues. There is, I think, a lack of predictability is what I'm hearing in the design review process, which makes it difficult for everyone. And I believe that the process has become unduly political in the way that we appoint and select DRB members and in the process itself. And Mr. Haghani, because you come to us with experience from other cities, and I know that other cities don't do it the way we do it. The good news, as you point out, is that Glendale is one of the cities that takes the design review subject seriously, and so we do have a design review process. That puts us ahead of many cities. However, I'd like some input as to what other cities are doing. And I'd like to know more about the model that Santa Monica is using, and in particular Santa Monica. And I'd like to know if that process, if that report can come back, if my colleagues are willing at that time to consider agendizing this as a subject that could be addressed perhaps along with all the work that's going on with the view protection ordinance, so that we are not crawling out of the fireplace and into the now I'm doing it. It's been a very long day. Please make a note of that, Mr. Mayor. We're not moving from the frying pan into the fire. on this. So I'd like to know if those topics can be tackled in the same time frame, not necessarily together, but in the same time frame.
And do you wish it only to be limited to a survey of Santa Monica?
No, absolutely
or
not.
any
I'd like a group of options.
other cities?
I'd like a group of options. I'd just like one of them to include that model, because I think that is something we haven't looked at here.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Mr.
may, just to make sure that I am getting this completely, so the survey...
Hey, Mr. Hagani, I'm not sure I'm getting it completely either, and I'm the one asking for it.
So what you would like us to report on would be both the selection process and the design review process in other cities as we find information.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Starbird.
Well, just let me suggest, we'll put the topic on an agenda and then get direction from council on what you'd like us to go explore and sort of the time frame for doing that.
Yes, I would like to urge that we do that sooner rather than later. It's becoming it's not becoming, it is a major topic
Okay.
in this city. I'd also, I've been getting a lot of emails and phone calls. I want to thank people for their interest in my mother, who suffered a stroke a week ago Wednesday, and I want to, in particular, thank our paramedics at. I know they all do a great job, but I want to thank the folks at Fire Station 29. From the time I was not at home, but from the time the call was placed to 911 to the time she was in the emergency room. In a hospital bed being cared for was about 23 minutes. That doesn't happen everywhere. And I'm very grateful it happened here. She's alive because of that. And she is attempting rehab right now. In case you're wondering, she's 94 years old. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for also the kind emails and the kind notes. And also I'd like to thank my colleagues here at the dais and members of the city staff who have been very kind through the last 10, 12 days. And then I'd also like to ask Mr. Mayor if we could get an update, if we know anything, an update on Davina Kuchina.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Draymond, we should have a report no later than this Thursday prepared to provide to you. Finishing up our work this week.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's
Thank
it
you,
for me.
Mr. Draymond. Mr. Weaver?
Got to follow up on what Mr. Draymond said. I know for a considerable amount of time I've asked for a joint study session with the design review boards and the council because I want to know if they're reading the guidelines. I don't think they are. So I don't know how that dovetails into what Mr. Draymond's asking for, but sooner rather than later, we should sit down and air out what our appointed design review board members believe and what we believe. They're apparently not on the same page in some instances. We all get the flack.
Mr. Quintero?
Okay, well, a third member that's concerned and has been for a long time with the design review board issues, and so I think we need to explore and investigate other possibilities, see what else we can do in the city of Glendale. Then the second thing is I had an opportunity to go to Adams Square for their annual festival, and they did a wonderful job. The local merchants there, and it was quite busy. The neighborhood was all involved with lots of young kids, and so it's an annual event that keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I think some of the money that was spent on infrastructure there in Adams Square is starting to pay off. I see more and more people in the commercial areas, and it was just an excellent festival that they put together.
Mr. Yusefian?
On one of the items that Mr. Draymond brought up and I brought up earlier on during the joint meeting is the issue of GWP's energy efficiency program. I think that's one item I would like to put back on the agenda. When we created that program a few years ago, There were different criterias, and so I think time has come for us to revisit that and also see if there are ways to create and research to see if there's any way of creating Energy Star certification or LEED certification or that type of stuff for a new project, and also to look and see whether there are also include new building, whether there be high rises or whether it be apartment buildings or condominiums or affordable housing, multifamily, also be included in some of these energy programs that somehow they're not in there. So that's one item. The other item is I did get a email, and the reason I'm bringing up this email out, and I'm pretty sure some of my colleagues got this. This email is from April 18th. It's a little bit old email. But recently, we've had Mr. Spiritu come up and put out there on the screen several issues dealing with the B-line buses and all the issues with their inspection thing. So I just thought I wanted to read this thing because I'm kind of confused who's telling me the truth. And this email says, I just finished meeting with our CHP BIT inspection officer, Dean Hammond, and he was ecstatic. He had just finished his inspection of our B-line buses. He told me that all he could find during his inspection were 3 minuscule problems, and that he had never seen our fleet look so good. This is certainly good news, and we will be following up this weekend with our quarterly audit. This is sent to all of us. I think this was sent from the individual to Steve Zern. I think Steve Zern sent it to all of us, to Mr. Starbird, and then Mr. Starbird sent it to the rest of us. So we read this type of emails, and then we have Mr. Spiritu come in and list a whole list of stuff that shows, and the same, I guess, the officer has tagged, which is very inconsistent with each other. So could somebody somewhere down the line deal with that, with this issue? I would appreciate it very much. That's it. I'm not going to belabor the point.
Thank you. Thank you. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Howard, I would like you to bring us a report on the feasibility of the Glendale, of the city of Glendale, instituting an ordinance regarding hazard abatement. And I understand that the county, LA County, has a weed abatement and brush abatement program whereby you're giving a notice to abate a hazard, brush hazard on your property, and should you not do so, they'll send in the crews, they'll perform the work, and you'll be assessed the charges on your next property tax bill. I think there are several instances in Glendale where the type of hazard and threat to the public does not reach the level of a brush fire, but other hazards certainly, falling limbs perhaps on trees or other types of dangerous situations that the property owner is unwilling to take care of. The code enforcement issue may be long and drawn out, as we've experienced in several other instances. And the city then would be given the authority upon proper notice to the property owner to go in and take the remedial action and assess them the charges on their next property tax billing.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to get together with you one-on-one to talk about that. We actually do have some provisions in our code relating to nuisances, where again, through a civil abatement process, the council or the courts can take action, and we've actually used the courts in the past to obtain an order to have the city essentially go on property, clear it, clean it up, and assess the property owner, whether it's a lien on their property at the time of sale or otherwise. We've actually utilized that mechanism. So if you don't mind, maybe we can talk further about some of the specifics you're looking for to see if it's already included in something we have, or it's something that we should bring back that may be more expansive.
And perhaps our discussion might be more pertinent next week when we discuss another agenda item relating to that. I'll leave you in suspense. Thank you, and that's all I have. This is being passed on to Steve Zern. The next item, Mr. Kasakian. Did John Fitzgerald come back?
No.
Does someone want to speak on his behalf? He submitted a card for oral communications from the fire. Okay. Okay, thank you. And we'll take him out of order. I understand he may have been called to service, and I will take him out of order if he arrives back at council. The next item, please.
Next item is consent items, including minutes following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed. I believe there was one card submitted.
Yes, I have a request to pull item 5C
And B.
and 5B.
B as a boy.
C as in
I like to pull 5B.
5B and C are pulled.
Mayor, move the consent calendar with the exception of B and C.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Council members Raymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. And item 5C, please.
5B.
5B.
Yeah. 5B is Director of Public Works regarding approval of a professional services agreement for the Chevy Chase 968 Reservoir Plan Review Services. At B1 is motion authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Wilden.
Mr. Yusefian.
Just call for roll. I'm going to vote against it. Aye. That's all.
Anyone
Okay.
care to make the motion?
Would
I'll
someone
move
like-
5B.
Second? Someone second the motion?
Yes. Second, sorry.
Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
No.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Okay. 5C, please.
5C is Director of Public Works regarding change order number 2 for ADA site survey. At C1 is motion authorizing change order in the amount of $96,270, contract C1-04105 with TDM Architects, Inc., for a total contract amount not to exceed $180,065.
I have a card to address this issue by Dr. Richard Espiritu.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council and staff, and the audience. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. I am somewhat perplexed, confused over this particular issue. I am in favor of getting the site surveys done here in the city of Glendale, but I'd like to bring to your attention a couple of issues. 29 facilities cost us $72,300, averaging $249.93 per facility. City Hall and the Management Service Building was another $11,495. For the 31 facilities, it cost us $703. The Alex Theater, Glendale Job Center, and the Glendale Water and Parlor Yards, etc., is going to cost us another $96,270, which is a 53% cost per facility. That's an average of $5,066 for the 19 facilities. Public Works, our Parks and Recreation, has been charged by DAC $11,470. To date, or once these surveys are completed, it's going to cost the City of Glendale $286,535. Yesterday, I had a conversation with Parks and Rec, and if I remember correctly, the chess park was paid for by redevelopment. Somewhere in this process, somebody forgot to put the chess park on the ADA site survey. I have a number of questions. Why the increased cost of the of 53% to do the last 19 facilities. Does this include parking structures and lots? What about the programs and policies such as hiring practice, streets, public transportation, Beeline, Dial-A-Ride? I talked about TV6 a number of times in the past. Is the new jailhouse and police station going to be covered, public works, and the public libraries, and the fire stations? And why do we have to spend so much money for the Department of Water and Power to have these facilities reviewed? Unless we have a lot of people who are disabled, but according to my previous conversations with human resources, we only have 2 people who are really disabled who work in the city of Glendale. One works for the Verdugo Job Center, the other one works here, and we have a volunteer in the police station. Now, yes, we do get a lot of people who have workman's comp, but that's a temporary situation. If they have a temporary situation, they can go to the motor vehicles and get special permits for parking and what have you, which will allow them to park anywhere with that temporary permit for a period of 6 months. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I would like some answers as to the increased cost. Thank you.
Mr. Zern.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Okay, let me start with the increased cost. As you notice in the report, we indicated that the city had originally done some ADA transition information gathering in 1994. At that time, we included a number of buildings, of which these 19 weren't originally included. So when we had the consultant come back in to update that information this year, or last year, I should say, they had a lot of preliminary work. A lot of work had already been done that didn't require them to go out and have to gather as much information. Since these 19 buildings are fresh, there's a lot more work that they have to do to gather some base information. Also, we left these buildings to the end because, with the exception of the Alex, which has its own unique features, the water and power buildings are a little different than most. So we wanted to leave those to the end as we went through the other buildings where we already had established information. I'll stop there with that if there's any questions.
Mr. Mayor, a quick question. Does the fact that we might have few employees or a handicap working in a facility mean we don't have to do the assessment or the survey?
Absolutely not.
I was just about to go there. It doesn't matter if we have 0 employees. Those buildings, and Dr. Espiritu has often come up and talked about the law, and what he knows is you have to look at every facility, whether or not you have staff members, whether or not there's an inspector, let's say, or a regulatory agency that has a disabled individual who's coming in to inspect those facilities, or there's a citizen that comes in for whatever reason, a repairman, let's say, that's not a city employee. Those facilities have to be evaluated regardless of the number of employees that you have that may have accessibility challenges.
Thank you. Mr. Yusefian.
Why do we do this?
It's required by law, Mr. Yusefian.
And then after we do this, what do we do?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Yusefian, when we finish this, which will be the last piece of the survey that we will have to do, including what Parks is involved with now, we will put that all together and compile it into a transition plan. Transition plan is really what the law requires you to do. Our goal for that is this fall. We are on schedule to finish that, at which time we are going to go and look at Ms. Beers, because she's also involved in this process. We will then take it to the public for review, public presentation, and input.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is, earlier on, I think Mr. Spiritu gave this item to all of us this morning during the budget. And this is a report that was done by a consultant for the City of Glendale on May 16, 1994. And it talks about ADA site survey, City of Glendale, facility services, 120 North Isabel Street, Glendale, California. And as you go through some of these, you see a whole bunch of stuff in there that needs to be done, and it was not done. So my question is, since 1994, and one of the items, room 121, this woman's toilet room and doors to this room does not comply with the ADA or Title 24 in any way. Public counter is 42 inches above the floor, which does not comply with ADA and Title 24 requirements. It's supposed to be between 28 and 34 inches. So my question is, I don't have a problem voting for this. I just want to make sure that it doesn't end up like a survey like this, and then, I don't know, 94, this is 2007, what are we talking about? How many years?
13.
13 years. So I don't want us to wait another 13 years and do another report and don't fix the problem. I mean, I know that our bathrooms right now at the management office, they completely do not meet the ADA requirement. The counter at the management does not meet any of the ADA requirements. So those are some of the things. Yeah, transition sounds good, but to me, it's not just doing this. We have to get the work done.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can
Mr.
just
Zern and then Ms. Beers if she
respond
so
to that. And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Yusefian, we've done quite a bit of upgrades throughout the city. We've, as you're aware, the City Council has approved ADA CIP projects, general ADA upgrade CIP projects for many years. A lot of work has gone into the parks facilities as we've gone through and done major remodels and certainly in new construction. We've done that. Is there more to do? Absolutely, there's more to do. At the time in '94, it was somewhat, and I wasn't involved, so I'm just going by with some of the information I have. The transition plan issue was a little bit hazy, and it's come to more to light as certain agencies have been called to task on that, and it's been specifically spelled out about this transition plan. From the transition plan, what I will bring to you is an implementation plan, which will include specific projects with specific budgets. And that's where we'll need to discuss priorities and funding. And it will be a big one. It'll be a big chunk of money. If it's a project that has, let's say it's Brand Park Library. I just take that off the top of my head because we've talked about that in the CIP. That will include all of the ADA component with it. If it's a City Hall remodel, that will include the ADA component. If there are facilities that we don't have any plans for upgrading or remodeling, you'll get just a straight ADA upgrade plan of action on that. And each of those will have a dollar figure attached to it with what we think the initially priority should be, but of course bringing that to you for both the funding consideration and priority consideration.
I understand that. 2 years ago, same council with the exception of Mr. Draymond wasn't here, Mr. Mnuchin here. This council, I think on a 5-0 vote, voted to give you the finances that you require to do the management services, the bathroom facilities in this building. You brought it forward. The price was originally connected with the office remodels. The council basically separated them and voted on the ADA modifications.
Correct.
You got that. You gave us a list, what it cost. Nothing happened. And so I'm going based on some of those things. Studies are great, but at one point we're going to have to do them. So
I understand, Mr. Yusefian, and as far as the bathrooms, the scope of work that was originally approved by council has expanded, including this chamber. I was directed to include this chamber and include the full ADA upgrade of this chamber as well. So we're working on incorporating that into the plan. In addition, we've got some issues with the structural components of the building and how we will make certain expansions, so I'm having a structural review done. But you're absolutely right. We need to do those. Those will be included as part of either components of the overall project or the overall project itself.
move 5C1.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. I see that that concludes the consent calendar, and I do see that John Fitzgerald has returned to the building, and I will call you up Firefighter Fitzgerald. This is a comment carried over from staff and council comments.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, council members. My name is John Fitzgerald. I'm a captain here with Glendale Fire. I'm also the vice president of our Glendale Firefighters Association. I'm here tonight to address a few issues concerning the fire department and some of the things that have been implied about the fire department by some of your frequent guests here. And the first thing I'd like to address, and I know that Chief Howard addressed it this morning at the budget session, is the accusation by Mr. Allen that the fire department has a slush fund comprised of grant monies. I know that you all realize that that's a pretty ridiculous assertion, but unfortunately when members of the public spout misinformation and it's broadcast to the public, they don't have the benefit of the facts. So I'd like to provide a few of those to you and to the public so that there is no misunderstanding. As you all know, the state and federal government doesn't come knocking on our door to give us free money. We have to have fire department personnel go through a great deal of work to go out and identify, apply for, and procure those funds for programs here in the city. That application process is very arduous and it's very detailed. It requires that the fire department specify specifically the items that they plan to use those grant monies for. When the application is submitted, it is reviewed by the grant authority, and if approved, the fire department is given authorization to purchase those specific items. That money is not transferred into an account that the fire department can access at their leisure. That funding is a reimbursable type of funding. When the fire department goes out and purchases vehicles or equipment or other things that are necessary and that were pre-approved in the application process, the fire department then applies for reimbursement. The grant authority reviews the expenditure, and if it was appropriate, they reimburse the city. So as you can see, there is no opportunity for misappropriation, and obviously there is no slush fund. And in fact, without the hard work of those individuals identifying and procuring that money, many of the programs that we now have either wouldn't exist or they wouldn't exist in the scope that they currently do, and they would have to be paid for out of the general fund. So wanted to clear that up and make sure that there was a clear understanding on your part and the public's part about how that process works. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch on were some of Mr. Milano's comments. He frequently refers to performance measures and how they apply to the fire service. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of things that can be studied in the fire service relative to performance measures. But there are a few, and Mr. Milano and Mr. Philpott have touched on several of those throughout their many, many visits here to your chambers. One of those is response time. Mr. Philpott, at one of your last budget sessions, pointed out that Glendale Fire has one of the best response times in the industry. And that's absolutely correct. No fire department in Area C has a better response time than the Glendale Fire Department. And I would say that probably in Southern California or the United States, we would have the top 1% in regard to response time. I'll give you a perfect example of how that benefits the city. We just had to leave, and which is why I had to go out of order here, for a small fire in an apartment. The call came in at, I believe, 7:13. The first arriving units were on scene 4 minutes later. As a result, a small fire didn't turn into a big fire. You may or may not know that fires double in size and intensity every 60 seconds. So it's imperative that a response time under 4 minutes exists for the benefit of the community. You have that here in the city of Glendale. The other thing that Mr. Milano and Mr. Philpott and Mr. Allen continually bring up, and somehow they bring it up in a bad way, is that fires are down in the city of Glendale. And that also is true. They haven't gone away, but they're down. In fact, we had a fire last Thursday night on the 14th where unfortunately an individual in a small unit over on Sinclair Avenue lost his life in an apartment fire. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make a difference, but we were there within 4 minutes at 3 o'clock in the morning fighting that structure fire. We weren't able to save his life, but we did save that structure. Anything that he had in there that his family may value is still there, and they can recover that. And although fires are down, they're not down just by chance. They're down because of the hard work and the efforts of people in building and safety, permit services, the Fire Prevention Bureau, and the individuals that work in the fire stations here in Glendale. The individuals who work in the 9 stations here in town perform thousands of fire safety inspections throughout the city on an annual basis. Mr. Milano has an intimate familiarity with that process. As a landlord here in town, his units have been subject to fire safety inspections by the firefighters here in Glendale, and as a result, his buildings are much more fire safe than they were before we inspected them. I'm sure he can attest to that. As far as some of the other things I'd like to bring up, I'd like to talk about a little bit of historical perspective, since Mr. Milano is very concerned with the fire budget and how.
By the way, the 5 minutes doesn't apply to you.
Okay.
That's an oral communications timer, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can't cut you off any more than I can cut off Mr. Yusefian.
Well, if you want to, you can cut me off. If I'm droning, go ahead. Okay. I thought maybe you guys had a button back there. All right, you're out of here. But I do want to provide a little bit of historical perspective about how the fire department's been run over the years, and the fact that we do take very seriously the efficiency that we provide fire safety service to the community. In 1982, the fire department here in Glendale ran approximately 8,000 emergency responses. And we did that with a daily staff of 53 firefighters on 9 engines and 3 fire trucks. In 2006, we ran approximately 16,000 calls. That's a 100% increase. Our staffing today, as we speak, is 60 people on 9 fire engines, 3 fire trucks, and 5 rescue ambulances staffed with 2 paramedics each. So you would think that with a call load increase of that magnitude, there'd be a significant staffing increase. Obviously, there hasn't been. Over a 25-year period, our call load has doubled by over 8,000 calls, and we've added a total of 7 personnel to our daily staffing. That's pretty efficient. I don't think anybody would argue with me there. Another fact that's important to note is that over that same 25-year period, the fire department has either identified new or improved existing revenue streams. And as a result, the fire department now offsets 30% of our annual budget with incoming revenue. Again, I don't know how you could be any more responsive or responsible to the community. So I just wanted to bring those things up and to also assure you that regardless of the comments that you may hear by the minority of people that you continually see here, the Glendale firefighters are going to continue to do the type of job that we've always provided to the city. We're proud to do that. We appreciate very much the support that we've historically gotten from past city councils and from yourselves. And if there's ever a situation where you'd like clarification on how we operate or like to come and talk to us about issues, please feel free to do that. I'm always available. I work at Station 21. Chris Stavros is also available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, while Captain Fitzgerald is here, it reminds me on an unrelated item, but I think a little piece of public information. You see the fire staff here today are wearing the black bands on their badges, I suspect, for 2 reasons. The firefighters from Pasadena who were killed in the plane crash over the weekend, and the tremendous tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 firefighters lost their lives combating a fire in a furniture warehouse. I approved this afternoon the lowering of the flags at our fire stations, which is appropriate under our city policy, following a long tradition of the fire service and the police service throughout the nation of our departments, our stations, recognizing the loss of life in the fire service. So the flags at our fire stations, and fire stations only, not throughout the city, but the fire stations, will be lowered in memory of those individuals.
I appreciate very much that you did that for us, Mr. Starbird. We are a big fire family, and that loss affects all of us. So again, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure council would ratify those actions.
Absolutely. You're not obligated to under policy. If the chief recommends it, I have the authority to approve it, and people will ask, why are the flags lowered, and that's the reason.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain. The next item, please.
Next item is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I owe it to everyone to perhaps clarify my position as the mayor who's in charge of oral communications, and it's within my discretion to permit people to speak on the variety of subjects. And oral communications, is a portion of our council meeting. It's one of the rare opportunities where members of the public can speak face-to-face to the council, and you can pester us or you can praise us. You can say almost anything that you want. However, I do have certain guidelines that I'd like to remind everyone about. Number one, any speech that I determine to be hate speech or racist in nature or bigoted in nature, I will cut you off. I would like the comments related that are given to be related to something within the city's purview. Of course, going back 2 weeks ago, not to pick on you, Nancy, but as a good example, we were talking about, you started out your discussion on the every 15 minutes program, and then you got into the city government, and with that tie, you tied into government lying to you, and from the city government, you went to the national government. That was a pretty far stretch. However, I think were that type of connection to be made again, I would not cut you off. I think it was related to government, and especially the school district and the city council and our actions. If someone comes straight out and talks about an issue that has no relation at all, conceivably, to anything that goes on in Glendale, I may ask you what the relevancy is to what you're saying, to anything that we as a council can do or have an impact on. I welcome criticism, and we've all been called names. We've been called jerks, for lack of anything else. I have no problem with that. If someone gets up and calls one of my colleagues a jerk, that's what we're here for. This is your chance to vent. However,
Mr. Mayor, we were called bubonic infested rats. Okay.
For lack of that type of description. However, please, it hasn't extended to any of our members of our family. If any of our family members get involved, I'm going to certainly jump in and ask the speaker to stop if any comments are made about our family. The city of Berkeley, California, a city that I feel is perhaps one of the most liberal cities, allows only 2 minutes of oral communications, and we offer a full 5 minutes. I think that's great. No promoting candidates and no blatant commercial promotion. I will defend the First Amendment to the Constitution, and that's what it's all about. That's what this portion of our city council meeting is all about, and I'm sure my council members also will stand and defend the Constitution to their last sinew. If any of my council members think that I've missed something, that a speaker is perhaps going too far, or staff, Mr. City Attorney, please get my attention. Flag me down, and I'll refocus as to what the speaker is saying, and make my decision as to whether they should continue at this point. Mr. Quinton.
Well, actually, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I don't care what people say when they come to that podium. As far as I'm concerned, it's 5 minutes of free speech, period. So I don't have any preconditions or whatever people want to talk about when they come to that podium. As far as I'm concerned, it's 5 minutes, and they're entitled to say what they want.
Okay. And then,
not running the meeting, so.
Right. Well, we have a difference of opinion on that, but I would like to keep some decorum into it. Mr. Yusefian.
And Mr. Mayor, to an extent, as far as the decorum is concerned, I do agree that I think maybe the way people address things can be done in a polite manner. But if I'm wrong, according to the city attorney in the past, when I have tried to stop those type of things, I have been told that under oral communication, they have a right under the Constitution of the United States to talk about any subject matter they want. If you have, once in a while, I do watch Burbank City Council. I don't have a life. Not only I do this, I watch somebody else's city council too, just to see what they're doing. And I would say during their oral communication in the last election, about 2 months prior to that election, if I'm not mistaken, there would be people who would come there and literally run a commercial, a video commercial on their oral communication. So instead of speaking, they would run a commercial about a candidate. And their city attorney basically upheld that, which we have not done in this city that I know of so far. To me, it's not very often I agree recently with Mr. Quintero, but I tend to believe that they got their 5 minutes under this great country of ours. You know, all I ask is please choose your words carefully. That's all I could say. There are different ways of relaying the same message, but use a little bit more polite words. And as far as I'm concerned, call me whatever you want to call. When I signed up for it, I knew I was going to get trashed anyway, so heck, fair game. That's fine. Doesn't mean I don't get hurt. I have feelings too, like everybody else, but...
Okay. Thank you. Let's just get into it then, shall we? The first speaker is Remo Alexandri.
Okay, I was not expecting to be the first speaker, but good afternoon. My name is Remo Alexandri, or Remo Alexandri, whichever way you want to pronounce it is fine. It's incredible. 2 weeks ago, I raised a very important subject here. I call it Weaver fiasco, scandal. And it's incredible that nobody takes notice of that. Nobody talks about that. If it was something very normal or okay. And it's because for years and years, the Armenian community has been put down implicitly or explicitly. And we have to put an end to this sort of behavior. Do not reward, do not applaud, do not encourage those kind of rewards, behaviors. And just to be a quick reminder, Mr. Yusefian and former council member Manukian raised the allegations that Mr. Weaver, after his re-election, made comments in effect of that he has been given the mandate to kick out us, Armenians, from this city. And I'm becoming more and more convinced that he really made those comments because he doesn't refute those allegations. Or as you see, just stone-faced sitting over there. And I don't know, I think he's decapacitated himself to serve as a council member, and we might do something about it. We are 50% of the population of Glendale, and we have our unique cultural, social makeup. Banquet halls. Banquet halls are not just business establishments. They are social gathering places. They are part of the fabric of this community, and I think you should take it into account when you're dealing with banquet halls. And all these exaggerations that are going on about these banquet halls are just going too far. That's the place that Armenians gather. They celebrate their weddings, their christenings, baptisms, engagements, family events. They take their non-Armenian friends. That's the place they can sort of demonstrate themselves and their culture and feel good about themselves or their food and their culture or whatever. Though, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a hybrid of extreme consumerism that is going on here and whatever they've brought from wherever they came from. So that's my opinion about the banquet hall issue, that is getting, I think, too far. And the concentration is just ridiculous. You just spend, I think, a year ago or something, you called a meeting or something, nobody showed up from the immediate neighborhoods of those banquet halls. If those banquet halls really pose such great grievances to the neighborhoods, you should have expected hundreds and hundreds of people to show up. But no, it's a made-up fantasy. I don't know. People just like to come here and talk about things. And they're more than welcome to do that. But I think you should not applaud or encourage or take into account their opinions, especially when those are made by people who have a very bad track record of insulting the Armenians in the past, whether explicitly or implicitly, from behind this podium or other places, or they befriend with people who hate Armenians. And the best example is what happened with the political pandering of Mr. Weaver that goes in those dark circles of cave dwellers and makes such comments about the Armenian community. And
well, you're getting a little bit deep in the cave dweller description, so
there are too many nice people living here, but there are some cave dwellers. They live in expensive caves, but they are cave dwellers after all, because of what they say. By the way, this is not heresy. This is a first-hand knowledge, and it is brought up by one of our dear friend from the 15% non-Armenian white population who brought this information to Mr. Manoukian. So I'm not speaking against any particular group. I'm speaking about the wrong political atmosphere the city is living through for a long time, and you're getting too cozy. Same people come here, same faces, same whatever, and they always push and they win. So thank you very much. I have more to talk about. I don't have any more time. I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Albert Abkarian.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for allowing me to speak. I won't call you a jerk. I'll just stick with the facts. I'm here today to discuss what happened in the city council meeting last week and its relation with an appeal hearing that was going on at the same time in the Board of Zoning Appeals. I don't want to talk about the actual case. I don't want to concentrate on what was said in this chambers. I don't even want to talk about was it appropriate or inappropriate for that comment, was it true or not, or was it something that should have been said or not. I want to talk about the process. I want to talk to you guys about what is right and what's wrong. You and your predecessors have set up an appeal process in this city for citizens of this city to grieve if they believe zoning administrator is wrong. They go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If they don't believe the Board of Zoning Appeals have done them justice, then they'll come to you. And if that's not right, they'll go to the Superior Court. That's a process that's set by this city, and they require that the citizens of this city follow the process the same way as anyone else do it. For anyone in the city council or associated with the city council to make statements that would directly affect that appeal process, knowing that the appeal will eventually come to you, there's no other word for it but to say that it's inappropriate and it's wrong. I don't want to go into what was said, how it was said. I don't want to even go into merits of if it was right or wrong, what they said was right or wrong. But once you set up an appeal process, once you approve that appeal process, it is inappropriate for you to influence that process indirectly or directly prior to someone having a due process right of going through that process. That happened to a client of mine last week, where a council member or somebody in this city made some comments that affected directly their rights, due process rights of going through in front of Board of Zoning Appeals and being able to represent their case properly. I ask you not to do that in the future, to basically hear what you're saying and have some restraint, understanding that you are the ultimate decision makers of some of these appeals coming to you. I don't know what's going to happen, how this person could even bring a case in front of a city council that has already made comments without hearing the facts about what has happened. I don't know how they're going to do at what decision they're going to make. But please allow the process to go forward. Please don't prejudice the case and allow the people to go through the due process of mentioning or stating their case to different commissions that you appointed. If you're not going to do that, let them just come to you directly. Why go through the commissions when you're going to make statements before they have a right to go through the appeal processes? That's the first issue I wanted to bring up. The second issue that is extremely important, that kind of tailors into what some other people have said, and I've written an article in the Glendale News Press about this. Statement of one person is a statement of one person, except City Council that's elected by thousands. I respect your statement because you represent thousands of people who voted for you. However, sometimes in this council and in some of the commissions in the city, more weight is put on one person's statement because they appear more often than other people. But that one statement should be counted as 1 out of 200,000, and it should be given the same amount of weight, unless if they represent a larger group, and then it will be given the same type of weight. Sometimes the homeowners associations are given more weight than they should. They don't represent me or any of my friends in the Royal Canyon, but sometimes they come in here and they represent like they do. They don't represent a lot of people. I venture to say they represent less than 2 to 5% of the homeowners in the city. But sometimes they're given more weight than they should. Sometimes statements from some individuals in here, which I have a lot of respect for, by the way, are given more weight than they should. They are just statements from one individual who have more time than some of us who don't appear in front of you all the time. Please, I ask you to give these individuals' statements not as much weight as, just give it the same amount of weight as it deserves, which is a statement by one individual or a very small group of people. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Howard, I'd like you to comment on that. I think it's a good point because we sit as quasi-judicial officers, the ultimate appellate body of the city, and occasionally, and I don't, unfortunately, my mind draws a blank as to what case exactly Mr. Abkarian's talking about, but it doesn't matter. The case doesn't matter. But let's say there's something going through the appeals process and we get public comment and we perhaps make a comment, oh, I can't believe this type of operation is being run, et cetera. Does that in any way disqualify us, or does it appear improper for us to make such comments when, in fact, we may be hearing that same case weeks later?
It really is a factual question. The ultimate decision, the ultimate issue is one of bias. Have you expressed an opinion that essentially, if the matter did come to you, to the point, have you expressed an opinion in the past that would essentially indicate that you cannot keep an open mind and render a fair decision if the matter would come to you? In the past, I've advised counsel not counsel with an S, but counsel with a C, you folks up here, that when a matter is pending before a lower quasi-judicial tribunal like the BZA, for example, or Planning Commission, that when someone wants to talk about it, that council members should be circumspect in their responses, lest they render, if not just the appearance of bias, actual bias. Actual bias has to be demonstrated by concrete evidence. There's legions of case law. In fact, there's some more recent cases that have come down that have found bias in areas where they haven't found before. I know the case that Mr. Abkarian is talking about. I couldn't comment on it now without going back and looking at a DVD. I just don't have a recollection that we reached that level with the comments. And, in fact, my recollection was the portion of the conversation that occurred related to an issue that was not before the BZA. But, again, whether or not that had any crossover effect on the BZA, I just couldn't say. But as a general rule, when a matter is pending before a lower tribunal and there's a possibility that the matter may be appealed before you, you should be somewhat circumspect in your comments relating to that, lest they be interpreted as whether it's influencing a lower border commission or reflecting your views to the point where someone would believe that you can't keep an open mind and essentially offend procedural due process.
Will you be the one who notifies us of that? Many times I think we're not aware. And should we make a comment that we should not make, we don't want to jeopardize or cast any doubt on our system of appeals through the BZA, for instance, and then to council?
The test is pretty high, and the answer is yes. I would. if I
Just
heard
give
it.
us, ring the bell for us and say, by the way, this is something pending. Herbert Milano.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, members of the City Council and City staff. I would like to relate to you a story. It concerns something that occurred 2 years ago, Thanksgiving morning. My son and his cousin were involved in a 40-mile-an-hour collision against a traffic light pole at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was called up, went to San Diego, this is the La Jolla area, and thank God that the paramedics in San Diego attended to them, extricated them from the car, took them to the emergency room, and both kids are sound and safe today. So I would say that I'm incredibly grateful for the professionalism and the dedication that firefighters and paramedics have throughout California. And it is with all my due respect to their commitment to service that I mention the things that I mentioned with regard to performance measures. Because I believe that every department, it doesn't matter if it is the fire department, the police department, GWP, every department should be accountable to some type of performance measures. Look, we have our military in Iraq today, and even though they have their members die every single day, we still hold them accountable. You know, even though they have an extremely high level of risk, we still hold them accountable. And we're held accountable, and we hope to hold accountable our Congress and the President with regard to the budget as well. You see, the whole idea of creating performance measures is so that we, the public, can know that we are being effective with the use of our city funds. And the fire department should not be an exception. All departments should be. That way we can assess and appreciate the level of competence as well. I have come to you many times to ask for different types of performance measures, and let me mention another one. It is the performance measures with regard to our inviting the public to come and express their views at commission meetings. And I can tell you that time and time again, as I continue to explain to them the issue about performance measures, oftentimes I'm still the only speaker present. And I would love to see the City Council encourage all of the commissions to set parameters and guidelines and objectives to invite the public. Many times I have suggested that those individuals who come to the City Council to put their email and their topic that they like to talk about, because oftentimes that is their passion, be it their traffic, or be issues with regard to the banquet halls, or be issues with regard to traffic congestion on Brand, whatever. And for you to invite us, take down our names, and send us an email and say, look, next week this is being covered. I was at the GWP meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I suggested that people be informed, especially those individuals who are really concerned about energy conservation. And I was given the following statement, the following anecdote. Well, we have this stuff in the web, and we have only one person interested in our greening of our city project. I cannot imagine that out of a city of 200,000, we only wind up with one individual who is interested in energy conservation or water conservation or turning our city green. The thing is that we don't do that. We don't reach out actively, proactively, for people to come present and come forward to express their opinions and their views with regard to Parks and Recreation or GWP or any other. Very few people show up, one or two persons. I was the only speaker at the Civil Service Commission last time. And I tell you, I wasn't treated very well. So it is my hope that one of the measures that you use for the future as a measurement of how you reach out to the community is to count the number of people in the public who are present and maybe even the number of people who actually voice their opinions at these commission meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. The next speaker is Guadalesa Rivera. Followed by Vartan Garbetian.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Najarian, City Council members, and staff. I left prior to the meeting a package of information about some of the work that I'm doing with the city. I'm
State your name for the record.
Guadalesa Rivera. I'm a community advocate with Glendale Adventist Medical Center. And the last 2 years, we've been working with the Glendale Healthy Youth Advocacy Coalition to stop the sale of tobacco products to minors. And we have several ways of surveying the community. And most recently, I'm working with the Glendale Tobacco Retail Permit Task Force, which is headed by Neighborhood Services. And I have to say that in spite of a very busy schedule, very heavy workload, Sam Engel and Noreen Benjamin have been making a great effort, not only drafting this ordinance one time, but several times. They're getting feedback from health groups, youth groups, civic groups, and most recently, tobacco retailers. And I work with advocates throughout the county of Los Angeles, and I have to say, really, here in Glendale, we've made the most earnest effort to reach out to tobacco retailers who are most directly affected by the permit. We had a meeting on May 10th. Several members came out. We went over the draft point by point, took notes. We visited the retailers in their stores. We take their calls. We're having another meeting, and I'm inviting anyone concerned to come this Thursday at 6 o'clock to the Perkins Building Community Room. We will go over the new draft. This is about 4 or 5 times that Sam has okayed a draft to be presented. And I want to say that, by the time we come up with a draft that we can present to the city attorney for his approval, I think we can feel very proud of this outreach effort, because other cities simply don't do this. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Vartan Garbetian, followed by Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. My name is Vartan Garpetian. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm here tonight along with 30 or 40 people, citizens of Glendale, who reside here. We are very concerned. I'm here to voice our concern to our elected officials about what takes place in these chambers. We are concerned about the way council members act here. We are concerned about what goes on. Concerned about the way the council members are behaving. No offense, I'm not here to offend anybody. I'm not going to take my First Amendment right to the extreme. But if you watch that last 4 or 5 or 6 council hearings, you could tell there is a huge tension, the animosity between the council members, and that concerns us. The way the body language, when one speaks, the body language of the others. When you guys take a vote, the way the vote is being taken, it concerns us. One insults the other. I think that's where you should draw the line, Mr. Mayor, that council members should not insult each other. That's our opinion. We are respectfully asking all of this to be taken into consideration. The community is concerned about all the new ordinances, the new laws that is going to come before you, either the old ones that are going to be revisited or the new ones that are going to come before you, the way you're going to take a vote on that. If there's that much tension, I don't know how the votes are going to come out. I don't care what the subject is. Is it hillside? Is it transportation parking? Is it high-rises? It's the Chevy Chase, reservoir, whatever that is. Is it the schools? We need cooperation between council members. You don't have to be best buddies. We're not asking that. We were asked many times, you don't get along with your spouse all the time. Neither should we. You're not spouses. You're representing us. We elected you to represent us. So we are asking you to take that into consideration when you're taking votes. That not vote because I like this guy sitting next to me or not. And most importantly, I think our concern is that this tension is going to filter down to our different departments in the city. Fire departments, planning, zoning, you name it. Because we all know we have unions, and unions, they support different council members at the election time. And we don't want this division. We have enough division. We have enough problems as it is. We do not want this to be politicized in our city. You were right. Some of the commissions may be politicized. I don't know about that. But if that is, this is going to filter down, have a chain reaction into our city employees. And that's going to be horrible. And speaking of the city employees, we are, as a community that are here tonight, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, out there on the interest of time, they didn't show up today, and they're not going to speak. But if it's needed, they will. We are in support, 100% support of our city staff and the management teams that we have. You name it, zoning, fire, planning, public works, and most of all, Mr. Starbird. We are wholeheartedly supporting him. He's doing a great job for our city. This city is one of the best cities. I've been all over the world. I lived in many different cities. This is, if not the best, one of the best cities in the whole world. And when I say in the whole world, I mean it. And Mr. Starbird is doing a great job, and we support him. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, maybe except me. Maybe my mistake was here being here tonight. But overall, I think this gentleman is doing a great job, and we support him 100%. And us who are here tonight, we are the silent portion of this community. We don't show up here every week and speak. But there is thousands and thousands and thousands of them. If needed, we would be here and speak and voice our opinion, because we want a council, elected officials, to vote the way that it's going to serve and benefit the entire community. That's what we're looking for. That's why we are here tonight. And again, on the interest of time, not everybody who's here tonight with me is going to speak. They're just here to, in a way, support the statements that I'm making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bob, I'm sorry about my jokes about your speaking so long. You forgive me?
I'm not marrying you, so don't even go there.
Barry Allen, followed by Mike Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council staff, and of course the public. I'm Barry Allen. You know, it's good to see all these people here. I think last week, Mr. Mayor, you asked, where's everybody? You know, how can we get, you know, we want people to call and let us know if they're afraid of retaliation or harassment or anything of that nature. And there's an editorial in Vanguard this week that speaks to that. And I think one of the issues that as well speaks to that is the comment of the former mayor this morning at the study session relative to the public coming and speaking out. And that didn't fit his mettle. I understand that. And also I understand that the oral communications is covered under what's known as the Ralph M. Brown Act. And that specifies the types of communication. And the basic thing is that it has to be within the purview of the legislative body. And I think that was one of the basic things, and I see Mr. Howard nodding, and I thank you for that. And of course, the former Mayor Weaver today also said that it was in my plan to get rid of Mr. Starbird and Mr. Howard. And actually, I haven't heard that in my plan, but I think you're the only body that can really do that. So I want to make sure that that's known. Now, in addition, of course, you heard the Vice President of the Firefighters Association, and that was great. I'm really happy he was here. He didn't really address the issue. He told you how well the grant fund works. He didn't talk about the issue of the budget. And I won't talk about that because it's on the agenda. And we also heard him talk about Mr. Milano and Mr. Philpott and myself. And I certainly appreciate the fact that we're getting through to some of them. And I know that we could increase the response time, we decrease the response time by using smaller equipment and having patrol vehicles and reduce the shifts to 12 hours. And of course, the other thing that he didn't mention is he said 60 guys take care of these 16,000 runs. Well, that's not true. It's 180 because it's not the same 60 every day, is it? It's 60 different people every other day. So, you know, we have to look at that. So when you look at statistics, you have to look at all of them. And I think there's a major issue of accountability. And I know that this morning we heard that there's 1,000 sheets of paper. We can't expect everybody to read it or not. I made a suggestion to this council. Everybody take 200 pages, read it, understand it, and then ask about those issues that you have to those department heads. Sounds pretty good to me. And there's also something else. In the Political Reform Act, there's a requirement for statements of economic interest to be filed by department heads, elected officials, and others. Now, coincidentally, I picked up the statements of economic interest a week or so, 2 weeks ago. And lo and behold, the verification and the signature of Mr. Weavers was not there. So in reality, it hasn't been filed. So because it hasn't been filed, it is up to the city clerk to charge a fee for late filing. Now, lo and behold, I picked up another copy today, dated the same way, with his signature on it, backdated to April the 6th. I think that is kind of an interesting thing. I know it was in Mr. Kasakian's department. I will give this to Mr. Kasakian so he can take the appropriate action on that particular issue. And I think that's one of the things that we as a public are looking for. I understand what Mr. Abkarian said, Attorney Abkarian, about representing people. Yes, you've been elected to represent the people. And I have been asked by numerous people, thousands of people, to speak for them. And I do that. I don't try, I do it. And I think that's what makes a difference. And I try, and I do that in a balanced fashion. I look at the information that is provided under public records and public information and use that information to ask you the questions that the public is asking for, looking for answers. I'm Barry Allen. I thank you for your time.
Were the rest of our forms okay? Or did you just start with Mr. Weaver? I don't remember filing mine, but I might guess I must have.
If I might, the only problem was Mr. Manukian's outgoing, and he sent it to the FPPC, and they realized it hadn't been signed and sent it back.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Mr. Weaver?
Yes. Thank you. The city clerk called me and told me that I and Mr. Manukian, neither one had signed it. City clerk didn't catch it. When I turned it in, the FPPC did not catch it. I went down and I followed the instructions of the city clerk's office and backdated to that date and signed it. It's on record. Simply a slip-up. But all the facts in there were accurate.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you say city clerk, it wasn't directly me, though.
City clerk's office. I could have put any date on. If you wanted the date, fine.
I just want to
did
assure.
nothing illegal.
I understand. I want to assure
No
Mr. Allen.
declarations to make. It's a one-page. You want to drive me off the council because of that? Go right ahead.
Thank you.
Make my day.
Mr. Mayor and Council, and city staff, city manager Jim Starbird, I want to assure everyone, the public, including Mr. Allen, that the city clerk's office processes the statements of economic interest, also known as the Form 700s, in accordance to the regulations outlined by the Fair Political Practices Commission. We make sure that they're filed with the proper and appropriate state agencies as well, and we do keep them on file in the city, and they're available for the public to look. No one is immune to being fined, including myself. I was late by one day, and I had to pay the $10 a day fine. And it is up to the discretion of the city clerk to assess the fines and how much to the maximum.
So you can determine if I should be fined backdating to 6 April because I didn't sign it. Let me know what your decision is.
Thank you. And remind us, please, when those forms are due. They're due at different times of the year.
Everyone, including the council member, has been very diligent about processing them. So that's fine.
Thank you. We have Mike Myers, followed by Sharon Weissman.
Mayor and Najarian, City Council. My name is Mike Myers. I'm a neighbor, actually. I live in La Crescenta County. I'm actually pretty easy tonight. I would just like to voice my support for Rockhaven. I think it's a great opportunity. You're going to have down the road less opportunity because property is being built up there. You acreage there to make a library. I think that you are going to be doing that anyway, in the sense the library, Montrose Library, is too small. And the fire department, you're going to be doing that at some point. I just think this is a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sharon Weissman, followed by Ron Farina.
Mayor Najarian, council, and staff, I'm Sharon Weissman from far north Glendale, and I'm here to add my voice to those who were here last week, and Mr. Meyer, speaking in favor of the city purchasing the Rockhaven property for adaptive reuse as an expanded Montrose library, using the existing library to expand the fire station, and the parking lot on the south side of Honolulu for an anchor retail store is a great idea. That property is ideally suited for public space to serve the entire community, our Glendale portion that's up there, and the unincorporated county, and please consider this idea. And just very briefly, I'm sorry everyone left, because I think the belief of some that frequent speakers are given too much weight might be wrong. I think perhaps the opposite might be true, considering the old saying that frequency breeds contempt. So thank you for your time, and I'll try not to be back too often.
Thank you. Ron Farina, followed by Lori Collins.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, City Council members, senior management staff. As the Executive Director of the American Red Cross, I'm always pleased and proud to be here and take a few moments to provide an announcement to the community. This coming Saturday, June the 23rd, we're going to have our Super First Aid Saturday event. We're going to have mass training for first aid. It's only going to be $10 for those people who would like to participate. That's a greatly reduced rate. We have a special invitation. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is because we want to, as we did with our Super CPR event, invite all the teachers in Glendale to come at no cost. We've done that for CPR. That kind of boosted our participation quite a bit. We hope that not everyone's gone on vacation and they can take advantage of this, as well as the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that live in our community in Glendale and Crescenta Valley. Also like to invite them at no cost. We think that this first aid course is only 4 hours long, but does cover some of the basics that you would need in a life-threatening emergency. It covers bleeding and breathing emergencies, choking, burns, and breaks. And so I think it's of value to this community and for everybody in it to understand what to do in those emergencies before our wonderful EMS folks arrive on the scene. The Glendale chapter is about to enter its 90th year in this community, so it's a fabulous time of celebration. Our mission is still to help people prepare for emergencies, to help prevent them, and to respond to them effectively. So thank you for the moment to give this pitch. Again, it's going to be this coming Saturday, June the 23rd. It's going to be at our headquarters, 1501 South Brand. It's going to be at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Jim. 8 o'clock in the morning is the first class. It's going to be for 4 hours. And the second class is going to start at 1 o'clock, so you can choose one or the other. I'd say most of the vacancies we have right now are in the afternoon. So we have a whole group of volunteer instructors that are going to be there. We always get fine support from the police department and the fire department. And other volunteer instructors are set up there, so we can accommodate quite a few people using all of our classrooms. The same day is also going to be a blood drive. Again, for those interested in giving the gift of life, you can call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE, make an appointment, and give between 9 and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The blood drive is there. We usually have a blood drive at the chapter headquarters about once a week. Again, we're at 1501 South Brand Boulevard. We're just a couple of blocks south of Los Feliz, kind of catty corner from Glendale Memorial Hospital. Our number is 818-243-3121. Just press 0 to talk to the receptionist. Or you can go online at www.arcglendale.org. Thank you.
Across from Alan Gwen Chevrolet.
Across from Alan Gwen Chevrolet. Yeah, we've been there since about 1990, I think.
And is there a minimum age, Ron, for the people attending and being trained?
You know, Mr. Mayor, we don't have a minimum age. So we've had the Cub Scouts come in. We've had younger kids. If they can read the test questions, I would say maybe fifth grade level is probably fourth or fifth grade level. They should be fine.
Who said anything about a test? You got to take a test?
If they choose to take a test,
okay,
it'll be in that
level. Do they
level.
get certificates?
Sure,
cards,
get certificates.
And all that? Okay, so this is the full-on first aid.
This is the regular first aid class, the one we provide on a regular basis. But once a year or more often, we try to provide an opportunity for some low-cost training. Right. And in this case, for the teachers and Boys and Girl Scouts, actually a no-cost training. So how great is that?
Do you teach them how to use a defibrillator?
Not in this particular course. In the Super CPR class, we show people how to use the automatic external defibrillator, which is becoming more and more popular in its use, but not in this particular class. Thank you so much.
And this is an excellent bit of training to have for any young person seeking a job at some point. To state that you do have first aid training, whether it's in a lifeguarding capacity or anything to do with other children or any supervisorial capacity.
So many jobs are requiring first aid and or CPR. So you're absolutely correct. People do require this for the job, and it does give you some very important basics. We find so many people come because it's a job-related requirement. That's what drives most of the people. So this Saturday class is kind of a chance to get the general community that aren't really required to do it but think it's a good thing to know. You use these skills when you least expect them, unfortunately, sometimes on your own self. You can cut yourself or burn yourself or find yourself choking, and you need to know what to do in that emergency as well. So we support the training of everybody at all ages.
Great.
For these kinds of emergencies.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Lori Collins, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening. My name is Susan Lawson. Good evening. My name is Lori Collins, and I'm here tonight to ask this council to consider taking two actions, both of which have their genesis in a residential property known as 702 East Glen Oaks. The first request is that the council consider abolishing use variances. The second request is that the city put some teeth into the enforcement against people who willfully refuse to comply with zoning laws of this city. The owners of 702 East Glen Oaks, Minas and Delita Carolian, acquired 702 East Glen Oaks, which is located in a residential neighborhood, in December of 2005. Soon after, they applied to have the zoning changed to C1. On July 11, 2006, the application for the zone change was denied. Since July 11, 2006, the Carolians have not stopped using 702 East Glen Oaks as a construction business. Recently, their son opened 2 new businesses at 702 East Glen Oaks. I do not know why the Carolians have not stopped running their business and started up 2 new businesses at 702 East Glen Oaks, but the immediate neighbors, one of whom is a 90-year-old veteran of the Second World War, continue to pay the price of the Carolians' business operations. In January of 2007, the city filed a criminal complaint against the Carolians. A few weeks later, the Carolians filed applications for a change of use variance and for a home occupation permit. Both applications were denied in April. The Carolians appealed, and the appeal is being heard on June 16 before the BCA. Any action on the criminal complaint was effectively stayed by the filing of the application for the change in use variance, and the trial on the criminal complaint was continued to July 30th. Variances are typically granted to give relief from lot size, yard, height, and similar requirements. The grant of a use variance is effectively a change in the zoning and is much more consequential, and unlike an amendment to the zoning code, requires only 3 votes at council, not the 4, or if a protest is filed, 5 votes required to amend the zoning ordinance by council. Use variances have been, since 1970, banned in general law cities by Government Code Section 65906, which reads in part, "A variance shall not be granted for a parcel of property which authorizes a use or activity which is not otherwise expressly authorized by the zone regulation governing the parcel of property." I request that the city adopt the provisions of Government Code Section 65906 banning use variances. Please also direct the city attorney to not agree to any further continuances of the Carolians' trial and to take some action soon to stop the business activity. And I'm saying the next statement with somewhat facetiously, but actually I believe it. And that is, if a city can stop a pot farm by turning off the utilities, I don't know why a city can't stop an illegally run construction business by turning off the utilities. These people are not living there, and they have admitted they're not living at this home. Finally, please consider enacting an ordinance that includes daily fines for willful violation of the zoning ordinances. Thank you.
Mr. Howard, as the speaker indicated, this is coming before the BZA.
Actually, it was a home occupation. This is the use variance. It would be coming before the BZA.
Okay. So it might be best if we limit our discussion to her second proposal regarding banning use variances and the other.
Oral communication.
I think Mr.
Responses should be brief anyway. This is oral communications.
Okay. I'm just, in case someone was thinking of responding, I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, I'm not only thinking of responding, I am responding, and I understand what's at play here with regard to speak, don't speak, because things might come before BZA, or a previous speaker's comment about comments that might have been made at a previous council meeting before it ever went to the BZA, and I'm not going to be handcuffed in my speech based upon the notion that something may go before the BZA. So if you'd like to...
It actually is before the BZA.
Yeah, this issue.
Yes, sir.
Not the previous one. Not that the previous speaker was speaking to. So I just wanted to make that statement. The other question I had, Mr. Mayor, is exactly the question you asked. So that was to the second part of the speaker's comment. But I'd like to get the city attorney's comments on the first part of her comment or question.
And that is the consideration of no longer having use variances or allowing use variances?
Yeah, the discussion of that. I mean, there are issues in this city like this one that continue on and on and on and on and on. And I hear all the time from my constituency, where does it end? When does it end? And there are many issues like it that are not necessarily related specifically to this case. Valderas Drive was another. There are a number of others, and in deference to a previous speaker, I won't bring up the one that he mentioned, but there are a number of issues in the city like this that go on and on and on. They become, in essence, a nuisance. And there appears to be no movement at all. I say appears to be no movement.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Councilmember Draymond, all good issues and all interesting issues. Some touch on legal requirements, some touch on policy-related issues, and some touch on philosophy. Just briefly, and perhaps this is a subject that would be more suited for a broader discussion of policy in particular on an agenda item. The policy of this city has been that while we may institute legal action through code enforcement to prosecute someone for violating the code, we do hold on that action pending administrative review if they have the opportunity to file for a variance or other permit, so that ultimately if it's granted, we're not prosecuting someone for something that they've actually now received permission to do. So there is a time gap caused by that, and that's a philosophical/policy determination that this council can control. On the legal side of things, as we all know, sometimes the legal process doesn't happen overnight. Unless we begin to start sending people out to actually arrest individuals for what would be considered to be code or charter violations, that's something that we generally do not do unless you actually witness a fairly serious crime being committed in the presence of a peace officer. More likely than not, we take statements from witnesses, put that together, file a criminal complaint, and then go through the process, which could take anywhere from a minimum of 60 days. If there is no request for administrative permits, could take anywhere from 60 days or a longer period of time. And lastly, there is a public nuisance abatement type of an action, which is a civil action, which we could take. This is a whole issue of philosophy of code enforcement and how once you file something in court, you lose control as a city or city staff, and that control then becomes vested in a judge or a jury. And so it's a great topic for discussion, and in fact, it may, again, if it's of interest to the council members, certainly it can be the subject of an agendized item.
Well, I'd like to put it on the agenda. Let's have a discussion on some of the issues that you raised.
Mr. Hagani.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I may, from the land use policy angle, the issue of whether use variances, it would be a good idea to not allow use variances to be even applied for or not is actually a really valid one. I must stress that the next round of the zoning code update will be looking at all of our procedures and processes, including the variance process, our design review process, all of the application procedures that we have currently. And in that, as you know, we work very closely with the zoning code advisory group, and we will bring forth recommendations to you in a series of study sessions as we have done in the past. This one we have been saving aside for a little while because we know this one is going to generate a lot of interest. The variance discussion in particular, we are addressing from two different angles. One is when you have a lot of variances, the first thing as a planning professional we look at is to look and see if the policy that the variance is applicable to is a sound policy as it's embedded in the code. Because when you have a lot of variance applications, that means the policy is not working sometimes. So we look at it from that angle, and we propose code changes, zoning changes, or changes to the zoning text in other parts of the zoning code. The other angle, of course, is whether or not certain things could be applied for. And it's true that certain general law cities do not allow use variances. And that is something that we will discuss in great length with the Zoning Code Advisory Group, and we will bring forward some recommendations.
Thank you. Margaret Hammond, followed by Nancy Hunt Coffey.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, staff, my fellow citizens out there. Here I stand once more before my elected officials of Glendale, asking for justice, not just for myself, but for all the citizens of Glendale. Our quality of life is slowly being squeezed out of our lives. Therefore, those who come before you week after week to talk on the same subjects want to bring up some of these problems. We get called liars, laughed at, ridiculed by cartoons, and even threatened. We are labeled bigots and racists for standing up for our rights. Just when we say that we think something's wrong, immediately it becomes because we're against a certain group. And the interesting thing is, by the way, I went to, for instance, the Armenian Sisters School, private school up in Montrose yesterday, to participate in planting a tree, which I had donated to to each of the winners of the poster contest. The young lady, Anna, at the school, they were very pleased to welcome. They welcomed me, and I participated in the planting of the tree at that school. And by the way, Mayor, Jerry and I met your very pretty sister-in-law there, who was very happy and greeted me at the Armenian Sister School.
My sister-in-law.
We pay salaries for people to inspect and investigate violations, but yet we have to go around as individuals taking pictures under stressful conditions. Why? Because unless you have pictures to show, people call you liars. They don't believe it, and they refuse to obey the laws. The police and our paid staff are trying to do their best, but are not always supported by the City Council. Neighborhood Services has stacks of records regarding the barbecuing, the illegal banquet halls, etc., etc. But they cannot be enforced. The laws are on the books, but they're not being enforced. We have all kinds of pictures, but what good does it do? It's time for City Council to enforce the laws that are on the books. My fearless friend, Jarlene, and I went around on Saturday evening, and here are some of the pictures that we took of the various problems of the barbecues that are still going on. I invite any of you gentlemen, if you want to drive the car on a Friday, Saturday night, I'll take the pictures. And then you can be the witnesses that I'm taking these pictures, okay? I'm giving you these to look at, and on the back are written the description of what we're looking at. Caroon in Glendale, down in South on Central. Verdugo Club up on Glen Oaks is barbecuing. Those are the pictures. And MGM, the barbecue in the alley, is going on. As we went by it, the man came, actually, and stuck his head in my car, tried to prevent me from taking the pictures. And I wouldn't allow it. I just said, no, I'm taking the pictures, and that's that. He laughed in my face. He said, what are they going to do about it anyway? Who cares? And there they are. They're still doing it. If you look at the filthy conditions in the alley, the filth on the ground and the garbage cans, trash, and so forth, I mean, it's unbelievable that it keeps going on and on. And the one picture is of the Montrose collections that I went by with my friend, and we had called to try to get reservations, which they say to call. They never answered. We went by at between 6:15 and 6:30 or so, and it was locked down. We went and knocked on the door. There was nobody there. You couldn't get in. And yet they claim they're a full-service banquet hall. But what I'm saying about this is people make fun of me. I mean, why do you think people are afraid to come up here? Over and over they say, I couldn't get up there and allowed. I just couldn't. I feel too private. It's too, I don't want to be ridiculed and laughed at by my friends. I say, then who's going to stand up and speak? You either stand up and say what you have to say and feel that we have justice coming and want our officials to do that. Take care of us. That's why we elected you. We're not asking for anything extra. Just obey the laws and enforce the laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Hunt Coffey, followed by Ray Galloway.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm here tonight on behalf of Leon Mayer, who is the chairman of our Friends of the Glendale Public Library Authors, Artists, and Friends series. Leon is out of town this week. So this Saturday, June 23rd, at the Glendale Central Library at 10 a.m., we will be hosting, or the Friends will be hosting, John Ziegler, who wrote a book called The Death of Free Speech, How Our Broken National Dialogue Has Killed the Truth and Divided America. So we invite anybody from the community to come to that event. And then on June 30th, at 7 p.m. in the Pacific Park Edison Complex, we will be hosting Taner Akşam, who has written a book called A Shameful Act, The Armenian Genocide and the Question of Turkish Responsibility. That will be co-hosted by Facing History and ourselves, our own Parks and Recreation Department, and the Friends of the Glendale Public Library. So we invite the community to those events. Thank you.
Much quicker. Thank you, Nancy. Ray Galloway, followed by Michael Morgan.
Mayor Najarian, City Council members, staff, and public. My name is Ray Galloway. I'm here as a realtor as well as a homeowner to heap a little praise. I've come to praise Caesar. It is that the City Council has wisely directed the Director of Planning to proceed with looking into what we're calling the view ordinance. I've attended several meetings with Alan Loomis and with Tim Foy, and I laud their efforts. They're working very hard and are making great progress. This is a very important subject, and I think the City of Glendale is way behind the ball with regard to our sister cities in this regard, and I am just delighted to see that we're moving forward, and I have great hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Michael Morgan, followed by Laura Hayes.
Mayor Najarian, City Council staff, Mr. Starbird. My name is Mike Morgan. I'm here to present a brief petition concerning the Crescenta Valley support of the purchase and adaptive reuse of Rock Haven for hopefully a library and other uses. This issue of adaptive reuse of Rockhaven has excited the citizens of North Glendale, and this petition is just a brief sample of that excitement. I'd like to read what the petition basically says. We, the residents of Crescenta Valley, urge the Glendale City Council to support the purchase of the grounds of the former Rockhaven Sanitarium at 2713 Honolulu Avenue. The adaptive reuse of this property would be of benefit to both the current and future residents of Glendale. This expansive 3.5-acre property is filled with mature oaks and quaint bungalows and would make an ideal setting for a new Montrose Library Cultural Center on an irreplaceable site, providing vast potential for future community needs. Built in 1922, this centrally located park-like property in the Crescenta Valley would provide refuge and recreation for Glendale's expanding population in the years to come. The purchase of this unique property is both a timely and essential opportunity that will never come again. I would also like to read a letter from the news press expressing just one resident's voice but reflecting all our hopes. This was in yesterday's Glendale News Press, and it's from Joyce Hart. We are delighted to hear that the city is considering the purchase and preservation of a property that has become a landmark in this community. In 1987, my husband and I moved into a townhome on Piedmont Avenue, 2 streets north of Rockhaven, and have enjoyed walking by the property for 20 years. We have seen our neighborhood getting more and more crowded as builders have had to cram as many units as possible into multifamily condominiums. Many trees and much of the wildlife they harbored are being lost in the process. Rockhaven has been an island in the middle of that development. We sincerely hope it can be preserved with the landscaping intact. It would be nice if the city owned it as a facility to be used by all communities rather than any particular one. In our community, we have residents who can trace their origins to almost every country in the world and every state of this nation. We would want to continue that trend in Montrose. My husband and I also have been supporters of the Montrose branch of the library, so we would like the idea of the library moving even closer to us. You can count on us to support any preservation efforts. I've heard that over and over again, and I would like you to consider if there's a possibility of purchasing Rockhaven for adaptive reuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Laura Hayes, followed by Mike Lawler.
Hello, I'm Laura Hayes, and Mayor Najarian, council members, and fellow citizens of Glendale. I would like to definitely support the adaptive reuse of Rockhaven. Myself, I am an artist and photographer, and I've walked past the property quite often, and when I saw the big sign up there saying that they were going to put in condominiums, I was, astounded, because that should not happen to that beautiful property. I myself I grew up in Utah, northern Utah, where there's beautiful grounds and places to go, and there's not that many places in this area to go to, have a community and be able to create art in our community. And so I contacted the realtor myself, and I viewed the property. I walked throughout the whole grounds, and it was just amazing. And I was just, I just had all these wonderful ideas come into my head that what could be used for the community to come together, and then also bring other people from the whole world to come and visit our neighborhood and to communicate with us in creating art. And also with the library moving in there, that would be a wonderful place to have the children come, create community art classes, also include in the studio, like the studios to come in and use that property possibly in movies and things like that to create revenue for the city. I've just got a million ideas, but those are just a few of them. But it's just an amazing property, and it should not be, torn down or altered in, a massive way. It definitely should be preserved. And thank you.
Thank you. Mike Lawler, followed by Mary Tyler.
Have you shown the movie?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Got a little preamble first. Hi, my name is Mike Lawler, and I live in La Crescenta. I'm the president of the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley. I wanted to give you, by way of some history, some background on Rock Haven. I'm here, of course, obviously, to support the idea of adaptive reuse for it. In 1881, Benjamin Briggs bought the Crescenta Valley with the idea of establishing a sanitarium for the treatment of lung disease. What followed behind him was scores of sanitariums being established there for the treatment of lung disease, and then in the 20s and 30s, as the air became dirtier, it evolved into other uses, treatments of other diseases. The Rock Haven facility is the last sanitarium that's left. It's the last example of what once created La Crescenta. A second issue around Rock Haven, the history of Rock Haven, it was started by a young nurse in World War I. She was upset with the way that mental illness was being treated at the time. She was particularly for women, and she thought she could do it better. She established Rock Haven in 1922 as a place for women. It was run by women, for women, and it continued through the female branch of her line for many, many years until 3 years ago, when it was sold by her granddaughter to the Ararat Company, who have since closed it. So it's a tribute to women's issues in the valley as well. Obviously the sanitariums attracted a great deal of Hollywood attention during those years, and we have a film that we've made. John Newcomb has made a film about the history of the Crescenta Valley, and in that film there's a short portion, very dramatic portion, about the sanitariums that were in the valley.
It was during this period that sanitariums also sprang up. At one point, there were as many as 25 of them in operation. This sprawling ranch on the northwest corner of Foothill and Rosemont, built by F.T. Scott in the 1880s, one of the first in Briggs' new La Crescenta, was converted into a sanitarium by Merritt Kimball. During this time, movie stars were drawn to La Crescenta's remote location. Here they could overcome personal problems like alcoholism or drug addictions in relative privacy.
I have been a drug addict for 20 years.
Bela Lugosi came here to detoxify from his addiction to morphine. Tim Burton recreated his experience in the film Ed Wood. Another sanitarium frequented by movie stars was Rock Haven on Honolulu Avenue, just east of La Crescenta Avenue. Billy Burke spent time here in rehab.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch? I'm not a witch at all.
The building and grounds still stand today. Troubled actress Frances Farmer was sent to La Crescenta by court order. Here she was misdiagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic and received insulin shock therapy, a brutal and dangerous treatment which began her downward spiral, ultimately leading to her notorious lobotomy. On the eve of its demolition in the 1960s, construction workers searched the Kimball Sanitarium for valuables. They discovered padded cells, straitjackets, and manacles attached to the walls. This once peaceful ranch had devolved into an insane asylum. The building was torn down. Here we see its foundation looking toward Foothill. The hillside was cut and the ground made level for a shopping center. In this one location, we see the three stages of the valley's evolution. First, it was a ranch, then a sanitarium, and finally a suburban shopping center. Ralph's Supermarket has replaced the Madhouse.
Except on double coupon days.
So thank you. I just wanted to give you some background history on sanitariums in general in the valley, and it's a fun little treat. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mary Tyler,
And to think
followed by Susan Roberts.
I was born in a sanitarium that evolved into a
Thank you,
hospital.
Mr. Mayor, City Council
You
members.
never went back, Mr. Wheeler. That's the key.
Mayor, City Council members, staff, fellow citizens. I would like to talk on the issue of Carr Park. I understand the basketball courts are on hold pending input from the community to determine if they will stay or go. I understand some of the neighbors do not want the basketball courts because they're concerned about drug use. There are many people who picnic at the park, and the kids need a place to play, and the basketball courts are convenient. If there are drugs, I don't know what time this would take place. I've seen the police there, so maybe there's monitoring of drugs. But on Saturdays and Sundays, there are families there, and I've used the basketball courts myself, and I enjoyed the park very much. So I don't know. I'm just really speaking for myself, not so much the neighbors around there, because I think a lot of them are against the basketball courts. I mean, I don't live as close as they do, so I really don't know too much about the drug use. It's just that I don't know if it's really serious. But the thing is that I know I enjoy going there to read and on Saturdays or Sundays, and I know that there are many people who go there to picnic, and I really think that I've seen like dads and their kids playing at the park with the basketball courts, and I think it's just if there's just any way that they could be capped would be really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Susan Roberts? Is Susan Roberts here? If not, Nancy Kent?
My name's Nancy Kent, and first topic is free speech. A few weeks ago, a young man spoke during the city council meeting and held up 2 cartoons he had drawn. And although they didn't mention her name, it was obvious they were about Margaret Hammond. And I would describe his cartoons and comments as offensive and mean-spirited. A columnist in a letter to the editor in the Glendale News Press criticized the City Council for allowing the young man to do this personal attack. The young man's comments, however, were his opinions about city issues that are within the decision-making authority of the City Council. I believe the only criteria for stopping speech is if it's something the Council has no control over or if it's likely to incite immediate violence. So I think there was no legal basis for stopping the young man's comments. But others, including council members, also have the right to comment that they find his comments offensive. Next topic, the Divina Cucina Ristorante Italiano roof sign. The people who speak and write letters to the editor about this always include things like what a great restaurant it is, how long it's been in business, how wonderful the food is, how nice the owners are. Yes, those points help get more statements of support, but this case would deserve fair treatment even if this were a brand new restaurant owned by people who didn't know anyone in this town, or if it was a restaurant that had mediocre food and grumpy and grouchy owners. Based on the photo and articles in the news press, it looks like the restaurant owners played by the rules to get building permits, had the work done, and now are in limbo because the existing sign now extends over the new roof. I hope you folks or someone in the city will give this business owner super-duper fast-track special dispensation to allow this sign, close this case, let the business owner finalize this job with his contractor, and I hope this restaurant continues to prosper. I also hope it's safe to assume this is a freak case and we will not be hearing about similar requests in the near future. My last point, noise studies. When this item was before the council recently, I believe Councilman Yusefian was the only person on the council who advocated that instead of requiring individual builders to hire someone to do a noise study for each project, the council could adopt regulations about what new buildings need regarding protecting people from noise. Adopting regulations rather than requiring individual noise studies for each project sounds reasonable to me. Why didn't it sound reasonable to the others on this council? And what am I missing here? And is this already a done deal? Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes oral communications unless I've misplaced someone's card. If anyone feels that I've misplaced, please come forward. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, one question from staff. Is the noise study done deal?
The noise element has been adopted. Yes, that part is a done deal, and the noise study requirement has been incorporated in the noise element. Correct.
Okay. And for the record, I think Mr. Draymond and I were the two dissenting voters. I think part of that may have had something to do with earlier speakers who spoke, but that's okay. On the other item, I just want to when that individual brought us cartoons, I can tell you that I thought the individual was making fun of us, council, more than Margaret. And I've known Margaret for many years. She's a tough lady, and she can defend herself. So I don't worry about Margaret. She's as tough as Ginger is. So.
Moving on.
And that's pretty tough. Exactly.
Thank you. And before we do move on, I'd like to know that I completely disagree with the journalist from the news press who made a comment regarding my permitting the meeting to go on. I went through and reviewed that segment 3 times. Anyone interested? June 5th meeting, 1 hour, 3 minutes. Scrutinized every word the gentleman said. I found nothing offensive at all. He was expressing his opinion with a political cartoon, which is perhaps one of the most purest forms of political speech. Next item, please.
Item number 7 is adoption of ordinances. 7A is urgency ordinance providing for supplementary benefits and compensation of certain officers and employees of the City of Glendale to supplement the salary ordinance of said city and amending the Glendale Municipal Code relating to the compensation and fringe benefits under certain memoranda of understanding, GPOA. This was offered on 6/12/07 by Councilmember Yusefian.
I'm just going to say that the city attorney has a suggestion for the city clerk not having to read all of these, every single one.
I'm all ears.
We still have to deal with them one at a time, but since the language for each from A through F is precisely the same with the exception of the bargaining unit and actually, with the exception of the bargaining, they were all introduced by Mr. Yusefian on the same date. You can just note at 7B, for example, that it is the same language as 7A except for GCEA, and then same thing as you go down. Just
but I can't say whatever you said.
No, you're going to have to say it for the record when we get to the item.
Move 7A.
Second.
I do have a card on agenda.
How come we were able to introduce all of them together, but we have to vote on them one at a time?
Significant difference between introduction and voting. Ordinance is the highest legislative act the city can make. You need to vote on it. I can't predict if the votes are going to be the same or not.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
And Mr. Milano, it's your card that says agenda item 7. You are welcome to come up. I know that there's... you speak to the entire item, correct?
It depends on what Mr. Milano's preference is. It's within the discretion of the mayor if you want to allow Mr. Milano to speak on just 7A, which relates to GPOA, or A through F, which relates to
A through F.
all bargaining and unrepresented units, including the city council.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Milano.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian, members of the city council, and city staff. A year ago, I've presented the views that I'm going to present today. And those are the views that we need full disclosure with regard to campaign contributions and the eventual vote that you take with regard to the negotiations and the arrangements you have made with the various city unions. As I tried to express this the last time, I believe that I was referred to an article that I also wrote in the Glendale News Press, and the mayor then decided that I was going to be escorted from this particular podium out of the chambers. Since then, I filed for my...
This was not done on purpose, I just want to let you know.
Yes. I filed a lawsuit to preserve my free speech rights, and I believe that it's now gone into federal court. My issue with campaign contributions is that it would be nice for the public, and I would say more than nice, it would be essential for the public to know about the level of contributions that the various different city unions and organizations contribute to the campaigns of those individuals who eventually are going to vote on those particular increases. What troubles me is that when I look at this adoption of ordinances, we don't see, at least in this brief summary, any reference with regard to what those contributions were, and I think it is essential. It is my hope that the city, as you study the options to change our campaign contribution regulations, that we move towards $250 maximum contribution per person in the city of Glendale. I believe that these contributions that run into the tens of thousands of dollars, even though many would claim that it does not influence you, I believe that it does. And I believe that the appearance that it gives the public is that it does precisely that it is meant to curry favors for themselves in the process of your negotiation. I believe that it behooves the public to know that tens of thousands of dollars were contributed to the campaign. And in many cases, the disclosure, at least by one councilman with regard to that, the disclosure was also inaccurate. One disclosure basically stated that $10,000 was received from the credit union, as opposed to addressing it specifically to the group that contributed rather than where the check came from. It is important that the public know that our budget is incredibly burdened by a significant amount of overtime that is not being addressed. And I hope that you take a close look in the future at our budget with regard to these particular increases.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, somewhat of a collateral matter, but I want to make sure the record is correct since we do have legal action pending. On the date in question that Mr. Milano was mentioning, he was not escorted from the council chambers. He had concluded speaking on the item, sat down, chose to want to get up and rebut comments made by the mayor, and then was asked to be seated. Police officers approached. Mr. Milano then sat down. He was not escorted from the chambers.
Thank you for that clarification. Would someone like to make a motion?
It's been made and seconded.
Okay.
And I second.
Any further discussion on 7A? Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7B, please.
You can do those.
7B is also a urgency ordinance providing for the supplementary benefits and compensation, and this is for GCEA, Glendale City Employees Association.
Move 7B.
Second.
Any further discussion?
You don't have cards?
No cards.
Okay.
Unless I'm missing someone.
No, I'm just wanting to make sure.
Feel free to interrupt, by the way, in case I miss your card during any aspect of this meeting. As a general rule. Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7C.
7C is also an urgency ordinance providing for supplementary benefits and compensation, and it is for the GFFA, Glendale Firefighters Association.
Move 7C.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7D.
7D is also an urgency ordinance of the same. This is for Glendale Management Association, GMA.
Move 7D.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Aye. 7E.
7E is also an urgency ordinance, and this is for a memorandum of understanding for executives.
Mr. Quintero.
For a second.
No, it hasn't been moved.
Are you moving it?
Move 7F. 7E.
Discussing it.
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion?
That record needs to be clarified. This is not a memorandum of understanding. This is for the supplementary benefits and compensation.
Yeah,
Why don't we
you
redo
said.
that? Let's be clear on that, 7E.
7E is an urgency ordinance providing for supplementary benefits and compensation for the executives.
Okay, and we had a
This has been moved and seconded.
motion and a second and discussion. Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I will be voting against this ordinance. I disagree with the process and procedures regarding executive salaries, and I also disagree with salary increases for some specific department heads.
Wait.
Mr. Howard.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this ordinance only relates to, I believe, it's just the insurance benefits and a couple of the supplementary benefits. It does not relate to salaries at all.
Not the salary?
No, sir. That's
When are we
coming.
gonna see that?
I believe that's coming July 17th for introduction. I think on the 12th.
You
July.
retract your statement.
So this is medical?
This is the increase in medical insurance, and I see Mr. Doyle's here. He could certainly elaborate on the other items, but it is not salary.
$200 and some odd $1,000, and I think it was something to do with the Blue Cross and all that stuff.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item is just a reflection of the increases in medical dental insurance that take effect as of June 1st. It does not deal with salaries in any way.
Nothing we have anything to do with.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, 7E, then let's have roll.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7F.
7F is an urgency ordinance providing for supplementary benefits and compensation, and this is for the council.
Move 7F.
Second. There's no conflict.
Any further discussion? 7F, roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes.
They do GHI the same way.
Next one, please.
At 7G is an ordinance providing for certain officers, subordinate officers, assistants, deputies, clerks, and employees of the City of Glendale and for their compensation, GFFA. This is offered on 6/12/07 by Councilmember Weaver.
Move 7G.
I'll second that. And again, I'd like to get a clarification from Matt Doyle. These are part of the negotiation that previous council had reached with all of these unions, correct? Is this, some of them are their second year, some are third year, some are fourth year?
That is correct. These are based on previously agreed upon MOUs, and the action tonight is simply to authorize the expenditure of those funds, which is required each year.
Right.
We have a motion. Was it seconded?
Yes, it was.
No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7H.
H is the same. It's an ordinance providing for the certain officers, and it is actually for GCEA. There should be an E.
GC.
There's an E missing.
Yes.
Okay,
Glendale City
move
Employees Association.
7H.
Second.
With no further discussion, roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7I.
7I is an ordinance, and it is of the same, and it will be for the GMA and GMA exempt.
Mr. Mayor, move 7I.
Second.
With no further discussion, roll call on 7I.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7J.
J is an ordinance describing the Glendale Redevelopment Agency's program to acquire real property by eminent domain within the Central Glendale Redevelopment Project area as required by Section 33342.7 of the California Health and Safety Code. This was offered on 6/12/07 by Councilmember Weaver.
Mayor, move 7J.
Second.
With any further discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 7K.
7K is an ordinance describing the Glendale Redevelopment Agency's program to acquire real property by eminent domain within the San Fernando Road Corridor Redevelopment Project area as required by Section 33342.7 of the California Health and Safety Code. This was also offered on 6/12/07 by Councilmember Weaver.
Mayor, move 7K.
Second.
If there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero? Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian? Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Thank you. Next item, please.
At 8 is action items, and at 8A, City Manager regarding consideration of state legislative platform and update from Townsend Public Affairs. At 8A1 is motion approving the priority project request for state bond funding for a full-service Northwest Branch Library. At 8A2 is motion approving state legislative platform, approving departmental priority projects for state bond, and authorizing action to be taken on various legislative bills.
With regard to item 8A1, I do hold an interest in real property at 1141 North Brand Boulevard, which is adjacent to the existing fire station and Casa Verdugo Library. Therefore, that places me in a conflict situation. I will be excusing myself from the room.
It's in Northwest. 8A1.
That's the Casa Verdugo Library.
I will be excusing myself from 8A1.
Actually could replace.
Once action is completed, I will be returning for 8A2. The Mayor Pro Tem is Mr. Weaver.
Oh.
So
Yes.
give me a jingle when it's done.
And Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council,
Yes.
consistent with Fair Political Practices Commission regulations, the council is permitted to segment this matter into two, what I will call, it's two distinct parts. One is the consideration of the request by the library for, I believe it's $22 million for a Northwest Branch Library, which ostensibly, if it was ever approved, might replace Casa Verdugo, which places the mayor in the possible conflict position. If that item is handled first, and there's actually a separate motion prepared at 8A2 to deal with that, I'm sorry, at 8A1 to deal with that, if that item is handled first and foremost and finalized, the mayor can then come back into the room and participate in the rest and the remaining of the discussion.
Where's that?
It's actually in the packet. 8A1 is the motion. In the packet, it's toward the back.
I have 8A1. There's another motion?
No, there's 8A1 and 8A2. 8A1 is specifically for the state bond funding request for the Northwest Branch Library, and it's found in your packet. Unfortunately, I don't have it's not paginated, but it's in the back where the state bond fund project summaries are listed.
About 3 pages from the end of the report.
After Montrose Branch Library.
Mr. Quintero?
And so this is strictly a bond for libraries, correct?
This specific request, as opposed to a number of other requests.
Next page. State bond for libraries.
Yes. It's 8A1.
8A1, it's the last page.
Right, so not fire stations or...
No, this is
strictly,
this would be seeking
library.
funding for a Northwest library from the bond funds. I mean, probably a slim possibility we get approval. Could potentially replace Casa, could potentially replace Grandview, depending on its location. It's a very generalized proposal. Nancy's here to answer any questions if you have it.
It's approval or rejection.
It won't be slim with the Townsend firm leading the charge, actually.
Is there any
$2
discussion?
million is a
or
lot of money.
somebody want to move 8A1 so the mayor can come back?
I'll move 8A1.
8A1 is it's parenthetically either approves or rejects. I'm assuming that's to approve the application for the state bond funds.
I'd like to hear something from staff on that.
Well, and also there is one card on, I believe, 8A.
Well, it's on 8A. Mr. Allen, you want to speak on 8A only, or what?
No, 8A2.
8A2.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Draymond.
Just a quick comment to the city manager. You might want to clarify that you're talking about, when you say Grandview, that you're not talking about the cemetery.
Oh.
With the bond measure.
No, Grandview Library.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Mr. Mayor actually Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Yusefian, basically each of the departments was asked to identify 3 top priority projects from each of the departments, that projects that could potentially be eligible for the bond funds as soon as you're aware, the implementing legislation is being drafted and approved basically as we speak. But staff would like to be prepared as soon as the regulations are complete to be able to move quickly with some projects and some input from the City Council on whether or not these projects would be appropriate
for us to move forward with. What the slight, I don't call it hesitation, is they're vague on purpose because, again, the final regulations have not been approved yet. It's sort of the general concept that we would like to receive council approval, and then based upon what the final regulations look like, staff will then proceed in an expeditious manner to apply to make sure we receive all of the funding that we're eligible to apply for and hopefully potentially receive, and that's it. And the library is being considered separately for the reasons explained by our city attorney.
So this deals with the library part?
The library part, that one library project only.
Okay, and so you're asking for Brandon Central, $5 million. You're asking for Montrose Branch, $4 million. Northwest Branch, $22 million. So those are the things that is in the pot. So we're going to try to get money for any of these things, or combination.
Just with respect to the northwest piece.
In or out.
Right.
And once that is finalized, and the mayor comes back into the room, you can't be discussing, otherwise you put the mayor in jeopardy, you can't be discussing the Northwest Library
So
grant.
can we
You
keep
can discuss.
this later so he can stay up? With that, I'll move to
That's your
8A1.
choice.
It was moved already by Councilmember
As an-
Quintero.
I assume that's as an approval to keep
As
it
an
in
approval.
or to reject.
Quintero, you made that, right? Was a second?
Second.
Right.
I'll move it.
Yeah, who seconded it?
Councilmember Yusefian.
You want, this is for keeping it in?
Yes.
The $22 million?
The project, the potential project.
Well, let me ask, is Townsend people around?
They are here.
Okay, I want to ask you a question.
This is Mr. Christopher Townsend.
Mr. Townsend, nice to seeing you again. It's been a while. Is the $22 million price tag on Northwest Branch going to jeopardize getting money for Montrose or the brand?
At this juncture, I would say it's too early to speculate. The reason why your staff is asking to get clarification from the council on priorities, so for example, if it's made clear here that you would like to see funding for these library projects and we understand the amounts, we can use this as we try to push on these trailer bills where they're going. Because, for example, there's no specific library bond that's been approved. Now, they are working on a new library bond. Knowing these projects and the amounts, we can work with, for example, your assembly members, for example, Assemblymember Krikorian and with Senator Jack Scott, and discuss with hard advocacy, here's the cost of these projects to help them shape pushing how big the next library bond is. That we are working on a library bond for the 08 ballot.
Okay.
Also, it affects the current Prop 1C has potentially some wiggle room with reference to community infrastructure facilities and working the trailer bills there. Now, if we get direction, for example, these are facilities you really see as a priority, we could attempt to then work with our legislators and leadership on trying to figure out ways to make funding for a library project eligible out of the 1C funds. And again, this is speculating depending on the direction you give, and then subject to the whims of Sacramento. I'm not nervous by any of the dollar amounts you throw around. For us, it's simply to get a sense of the scale of the size of your need as we fight and advocate for you.
So this will not jeopardize some of the other projects?
Correct, because there's not a specific application process right now. We would give our feedback to staff to give to you when it comes time to strategizing on specific applications if we thought a request was deemed unreasonable or could be counterproductive to other requests. So staff, in conjunction with you, could vet final strategy on which ones are we officially going to apply for and not. I hope that addresses your question.
Yeah, because you're the person in Sacramento, you know what's going on over there, and so I rely on you, that's why I pay you as our lobbyist to tell me whether or not it's going to jeopardize other projects or not, and you're telling me, no, it's not, so it just gives you guidelines to go forward.
Absolutely.
So I'm fine. My second's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, well, then, but after that explanation, from my perspective, the Northwest Library, I certainly wouldn't put that as a top priority for me personally. So when the time comes.
But I think at this point, all we're doing is alerting our lobbyists as to what areas that we're concerned with. There's going to be a number of these bills that will fall by the wayside. Some will move ahead, and where the prioritization at this point within doesn't matter. If we're interested in traffic, if we're interested in libraries, if we're interested in all that, whatever, they're going to go after that as the bills formulate. And we're a long way from getting down to real bills that we'll have to take a position on or the content within. So, Mr. Starbird?
Well, that's true. We might also find as we get into the phase 2 of our CIP process that other items will rise to the surface that we'll want to communicate to towns and our lobbyists that, irrespective of what we said here, here's an item that, frankly, we do need to push to the head of the pack and we want you to give more attention to. And you haven't been through that CIP process, so we could very well see changes occurring there that we'll need to communicate to them. This is kind of a snapshot in time from what we see today, so they can start to get a sense of needs and begin to shape a strategy. But again, once you get through the CIP, you may see other things that rise to an occasion that you'll want to communicate to them to emphasize even more.
What I'm getting at, within a priority, it isn't that important now to say, this is higher priority than this one. It's too early in the process, right?
I think that's correct.
Okay, there's no more discussion. How about roll call on 8A1 then? Oh, where'd you go? Okay. No need to explain.
I hope not.
I was actually just handing the urgency ordinances to the mayor for signatures.
Oh, okay.
Since they are urgent.
He's out of the room with an urgency ordinance.
Council members Raymond.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Yusefian.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian. And Mayor Pro Tem Weep.
Aye. Now we can invite the mayor back?
Yes, sir.
I relinquish my position. You're in charge again.
Is this the time that we talk about some of the other stuff?
Correct. We have a brief presentation, but however, the City Council would like to proceed.
Okay, the next item, please, is...
Do we need a long presentation?
Actually, 8A2.
Balance of the
Okay.
platform. Elaine, you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we do. Just a brief introduction, Mayor and City Council. As you're aware, staff, working with the city's new Sacramento lobbyist, has prepared a draft legislative platform for your consideration this evening. There's basically 3 components. It's quite a bit of material and information and direction we need from the City Council that sort of falls into 3 main areas. The first area would be creating a general legislative platform for the City of Glendale for our lobbyists to be able to effectively lobby on our behalf. And that also includes a legislative update just regarding generally what's happening in Sacramento and what Townsend Public Affairs has been doing for us. And in just a moment, Mr. Christopher Townsend will be coming up and going through a PowerPoint presentation on that part of the item that's before the City Council. The second part would be a summary of proposed Glendale-sponsored legislation. It is too late this legislative session to really introduce anything, but staff wanted to provide the City Council with a general idea of the types of legislation that we'd be interested in examining the feasibility of sponsoring a bill for the next legislative section. And the third part would be the Council's approval of suggested projects for possible bond funds, either from the transportation bond or the housing and infrastructure bond or the environmental quality bonds that were recently approved by the voters last November. So at this time, I'll turn the microphone over to Mr. Christopher Townsend, and he does have a PowerPoint presentation for you.
And Mr. Townsend, I'm getting vibes from my colleagues that they're pretty familiar with everything that's coming forth. However, is there a way for you to streamline the presentation?
Absolutely.
There are some questions. I do have a card as well afterwards, but if you could give us the condensed version.
A good lobbyist knows when to stop pushing his bill when the committee's ready for a vote. I will make it very brief. Oh, okay.
When you're ready to move.
Oh, well. Just thank you. My name is Christopher Townsend, President of Townsend Public Affairs. Just real quickly, just a couple big picture things to make sure you're in the loop on. Once again, for the 27th year, I believe, we've missed our June 15th constitutional deadline to approve a budget. No one's panicking because the real deadline is when the fiscal year starts July 1, and there's a lot of optimism and expectation that they will meet it by that deadline. It's interesting with term limits and redistricting on the table being considered as initiatives to be on the ballot next February. You're seeing a greater spirit of cooperation or trying to make it look like things are moving well to give the public a better impression of the legislature to vote for term limit reform. So we'll see these next 2 weeks. In fact, most of my colleagues are all up in Sacramento as we speak. I'm going back there tomorrow working on these elements. And most of it appears now, and I think this plays to the advantage of the city, that the infrastructure bond implementation, a lot of it's going to be done in trailer bills that are going to be coming by after they actually do the budget, make some decisions about a first round of how many of the millions of the bonds they're going to spend, and we can use those trailer bills to help steer where it goes. Again, we're talking about over $47 billion in bonds that were approved. They are not going to spend all $47 billion in fiscal year 08. It's going to be spread out over 3 to 4 years. So we'll be ongoing with those efforts.
They have to sell them first.
True. So
they have a whole bunch left
Yeah.
over from before. They haven't been able to sell.
So that said, in the spirit of brevity, I would actually like to introduce Sean Fitzgerald, who's our Senior Director for California, Southern California, who can just briefly top line the process we've gone through, which I think would be important to make sure you had a flavor of what we've been doing with the city, and then we can roll through there on the pleasure of the council on how much detail you want to go in.
Yes, and thank you. And I'm prepared to speed through this, so I'll do that and be brief. Very quickly, I just wanted to highlight the process that we followed when we first came on with the city. And with this slide as well, I want to really give compliments to the staff, which I think has done a great job of working with us and bringing us into the team. We've developed very good communication protocol with the staff, a mutual understanding of our roles, and I think it's generated some very good ideas that are going to allow us to move forward quickly. Just to highlight some of our initiatives, legislative tracking analysis obviously is something that we're engaged in right now. We'll talk more about that as you decide on your priority legislation for the year coming up in this next item. These are just a few of the things that we've been involved in. There's been a lot of activity on early in this year. I want to be very careful to say that these are not items we've been engaging in on a particular side or with a particular perspective. Certainly that's something that's left to your position, which we'll be talking about again in a moment, but these are things that have been moving quickly. We do have two California Cultural and Historic Endowment grants that were submitted back in March that we'll be looking to hear final dispensation on in July at the CCHE board meeting. Other developments, transit-oriented development, we have been working on through the housing bond with HCD, and we've had our housing bond expert, Jennifer Thompson, down here to meet with your staff and identify projects that can be funded within 1C. So we're starting that already. In addition, we've had a specific issue with the CAC, where we're able to work with your staff and with TCAC staff in getting an application actually rescored, and as you see, increased on our scoring. Not able to still get into the scoring window, but I think it's prepared us well for the next round of funding coming up next month. Infrastructure bond opportunities, Christopher really has covered that, so I'll kind of leave that slide with you there. Housing bond we already as well discussed. I would point out here we are working directly with Housing Community Development Director Lynn Jacobs, and we are going to have her here in Southern California at some time over the summer. We expect working on that scheduling now, and that is a very good way of pushing. Excuse me, yes, go ahead.
That was my question, was on the housing issue. I understand you also asked for some clarification and legislation to clarify certain stuff. Recently, because we were doing a project and it became apparent how they set the rents and the way the state legislature has worked out the rents, depending which pot of money comes from where, they have different limits, and has made the process very cumbersome. So what happens is if you have a certain amount of money from set aside, if it's a 30% in LA County medium, it's a certain amount. If it's that same 30% in LA County, if that money comes from RDA,
it's a different amount. If it's from the feds, it's a different amount. So all the numbers are always changing, and it makes it very cumbersome and difficult to do this. And our agency is not the only agency who's complaining. Throughout the whole state of California, everybody's complaining. Can't they all get together and just set one number for 30%, one number for 40%, one number for 50%, so it makes life so much easier for everybody else? And I think that's something I like to see if there's a way you could talk to our staff and get a better explanation. I did a very quick rendition of what they explained to me over a 2.5-hour period. So you could talk to them and see if there's some kind of a thing we could do with legislation to make this a little bit easier for people to understand and make staff's lives easy throughout the whole state of California.
Certainly. And that is exactly the purpose of trailer bill legislation, which we talked about, which will clarify criteria for distribution. Those types of things are certainly
And that was extra. I looked for it, and I didn't see it here, so you need to talk to them.
Great, and that's the exact kind of feedback we need on as we engage in Sacramento, so I appreciate that. Moving on, then, there are some $850 million in parks and rec bond opportunities between 1C and 84. Again, those go to the projects that priority list that you just adopted. And then these next couple slides are just a recap of some of the things that we'll be working on for the remainder of the calendar year. Again, most of which have really already been covered. I would just add, and these are 3 grant opportunities coming up within the next few months. I would just add as well that the legislature returns in August from their summer recess, which will be a very good time. Certainly, let me step by on an aside here to say that any time that any of you are all in Sacramento, we'd like to make use of you, provided your schedule allows for any meetings that we can drum up that we think would be helpful to the city's initiatives. But August would be a very good time for a set trip, a delegation from the city to come up to Sacramento and advocate on sort of final priority legislative items or potentially grants as well that are active at that time. So if that's something that's the pleasure of the council, we're certainly happy to make that kind of a trip happen, and we think it can be very effective in advocating for legislative positions on bills or bonds that you're interested in.
Mr. Yusefian.
Some of my colleagues, including me, have been going to those type of trips to Washington to do that. And we do get a very good response from our Washington lobbyists who meets us, takes us to every one of these members, and we meet with the members and we discuss the issues. Before we talk to the members, they give us a little handout, spend a little bit of time, tell us what the talking points are. So when we walk in there, we sound intelligent, we know actually what we're talking about, who we have to talk to, how we have to talk to, and so on and so forth. So I would hope as we move in this direction with the state, and that was part of the reason I voted to change from our previous consultant to you, is that because from our previous consultant we were not getting that type of a service. So I'm hoping that I will get that type of a service from you, which is gets me access to those legislatures, and it's not, I don't want to go there and just meet Paul Kokorian. I can meet him here. I want to go there and meet with the ranking Democrats and ranking Republicans that do not live in the city of Glendale. They live in Northern California, but they wield a lot of power. But I won't be able to access them. You have access to that. I need that access. So that's part of the reason we hire lobbyists, so it buys us access so we can put our case in front of them and get a fair resolution. So just let us know when that is, and I think you could get some of us who
certainly, and that is exactly how we would pursue a trip in Sacramento, to not have you meet with people that you can meet in your district and you see it at the community events.
Not that we don't want to see them, but
no, it's actually better to meet those people down here. They give you an hour here. They give you 10 minutes up in Sacramento.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a speaker. Why don't we hear from Barry Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council staff, the public, and the Townsend people. I think that you have a winner in the Thompson Group and the process that you've used to identify a number of the bills and pieces of legislation are good. There is one piece of legislation that is in this packet that I would suggest that, because it is a benefit to the public, and that is that the council encourage their use their strength with their lobbyists on Senate Bill 964, which is covers the Brown Act and serial meetings with staff. And I know that's one of the things that many of the council and staff would prefer that it would be opposed, but I think it's to the public interest to take potential problems away and keep these areas open. So please take a look at Senate Bill 964. It's in your packet along with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, SB 964 has been amended. I think the League of California Cities has now taken a neutral position on it,
Yes.
if not a support position on it at this point in time, since the amendments have they were intended to deal with a recent Court of Appeals decision, Wolf versus City of Fremont. And originally the legislation as proposed was viewed by many in cities, particularly city attorneys, as being somewhat a draconian response to the case. The author of that legislation was convinced that, in fact, perhaps they went a little overboard in response to the Wolf v. Fremont case, amended the bill, and it appears to be acceptable.
Okay, if there's no further discussion.
Move A2.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
And have a nice trip back.
Have a
to
nice trip.
Sacramento.
The next item, please.
9 is hearings, and at 9A is Acting Director of Administrative Services regarding proposed budget of the City of Glendale for fiscal year 2007-2008.
Mr. Howard, is this a public hearing? Open it up and all.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
members of
Mr.
council, this is a public hearing as required under the charter. The city council takes no action. It's for the public, to give the public an opportunity to speak on the upcoming budget.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was going to say that the charter provides for a two-step process. This is purely a public input stage preceding what would be next week an action before you to adopt the preliminary budget. Mr. Allers is here to give you a quick overview or answer any questions if you have them. Again, it's just a public input portion.
Then, would the council, yes, we do have. Would council have any particular questions of Mr. Allers that they haven't had the opportunity to ask in the last 7 study sessions?
No.
Okay. Then I will call the 3 speakers who've submitted
30-plus hours.
Open the public hearing.
I'll treat this like a public hearing and open
It is
as a public
actually a
hearing.
formal public hearing under our charter, yes, sir.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing and call Nancy Kent.
I have questions from all.
I'm Nancy Kent, and I'm here to talk once again about a nickel and dime issue. At today's budget study session, when I questioned the quantity of free giveaway items from city departments at city events, and I listed the examples: pans, keychains, Post-it note pads, baseball caps, my memory failed me when Mayor Najarian added computers. But after the meeting, I remembered that a new computer was given away as a door prize.
4 of them, I think.
At least 4, I believe, at each session of the long-range planning meetings. Over the years, I have infrequently questioned spending tax money on these giveaway items, and over the years, the quantity of these items has continued to increase, sending a message our city has lots of money to spare. The next item on tonight's agenda is about a trash fee rate increase, and I've heard the Beeline bus fare will probably be raised soon also. Probably the annual total spent on the trinkets and computers the city gives away is not large enough to be the cause for needing these fee increases. But I wonder, is there one grand total of how much all the various departments spend on these giveaway items? And if there isn't such a total in the budget, I am not actually making a request that somebody compile that number. I will just continue to question this expense every once in a while as I continue to observe the free merchandise from the city increasing, while the city also increases various fees for services. Thank you.
Thank you. I looked at Mr. Allers, and he gave me the negative sign as to a compiled figure for the, what shall we call it, merchandising? City of Glendale merchandising? Promotional items?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. There is no compilation of that type of expense that's delineated in our budget. It is most likely coming out of a miscellaneous expense account or coming out of a general supply expense that we then distribute to the citizens or whoever's at the job fair or wherever the venue is.
Mr. Quintero?
Well, I assume it's coming out of each individual department, that is, fire, snow and air, police, et cetera. I just wonder what the total is. I wouldn't mind having some feel for what the total is in terms of.
We can compile that. Yeah, we can do some work and pull that together. I might add that they're noted as trinkets and giveaways. You know, we talk about attracting people to events and sending a message and the likes. A lot of these items have to do with specific programs, not just giveaways. I think of the junior fire marshal program, the hats, the badges, the stuff. That's all for education. A lot of parks and recreation and library giveaways to kids is really to impart a message, whether they're coloring books or their pencils or the what have you. Everything to our lapel pins that, you know, are giveaways, the City of Glendale pins that we pass out here.
Those are.
Actually, I'm surprised I don't have one on. I think Mr. McFall took it away from me. It's his fault. I mean, those all fall under that. Those all fall under the same heading, and you know, I think you can see the purpose of these is sort of a city image and a feeling of community, and you give them out here. We can certainly pull that together. My guess is as even Nancy noted, it's a relatively a very, very small component, but a lot of it does have to do with programs as opposed to just something to give away.
Mr. Draymond.
I also recall, I think it was Mr. Allen, I could be wrong, but I think it was Mr. Allen that pointed out at one of our budget study sessions related to, it wasn't a department, it was, I think, 520, which was the Montrose account, parking fund type account, where there were lapel pins and other things that were purchased out of that. And so we might, if we're going to compile such numbers, we might be looking in a broader area than just, individual departments. So.
And don't forget my favorite giveaway item, and that's food.
Or water.
Food, and the as Mr. Starbird said, I think it does serve a purpose to welcome the community, to get the children involved in many ways. Bookmobile pens Mr. Draymond has, so I think we're rather...
We'll be confiscating his pen shortly after the meeting.
I think we've been rather frugal with the type of items that we've merchandised or prepared with our city logo on it. However, I'll... as the city manager said, I think you said you'd look into that and see what we'll...
I might note, Mr. Mayor, the reference to the computers, at least in my time here, was a very unique promotional effort to attract people to our long-range planning, and the City Council approved a special budget for that one. And it was full disclosure about the giveaways and the use of computers as door prizes.
Reflective of our critical desire to receive the community's input on those long-range planning issues. Thank you, Ron. Herbert Milano, followed by Barry Allen.
Herbert actually won one of the computers.
You won?
Herbert. Good evening.
Oh, Herbert won one.
Yes, and that was given to a very...
Don't complain about that one, Herbert.
That was given to a very deserving family in need, whose children did not have any computers, by the way. So you went for a good cause. Mayor Najarian, members of the City Council, my name is Herbert Milano. For the past few weeks, as you have discussed your budget session, your budget at various different sessions, I have presented oftentimes my suggestion that you give us objectives and measurements concerning your vision for the city and basically how this budget supports that vision. And so my question to you is, does this budget support your vision for the city, or does it support the vision of the city manager and city staff? Because I like to ask you a few general questions, not necessarily that you need to answer them, but does it address the needs of salaries and benefits and pensions first, and then whatever is left over, then the community receives that? Does it benefit the local residents, and precisely in which way? How does it reduce, for example, traffic congestion? You have a budget, we have a problem with traffic congestion. How does it do that? Does it reduce fossil fuel consumption? Does it reduce the number of pedestrian injuries in the next fiscal year? That was a major issue during the campaign. How does it improve efficiencies by department? For example, having our communication section under the administration do all of the communication for all departments, and so that all the departments can measure to see how effective they are in reaching the public and bringing them in. How does it increase participation by the public? You see, the problem that I have with a budget of this type is that it doesn't support your vision, and it doesn't clarify the visions that you have for the city. These are just numbers, $25 million more. I would like to suggest, in addition to, in the future, having some type of measurable objectives in your vision and how this budget supports your vision for the city, is something that I would like not to see next week, as you did last year, which you presented a religious figure to come here and give an invocation on that day. It just gives the appearance that we were getting the blessing from a religious figure on precisely the day of the budget. I pay attention to that, to such things, because I figure that there's something lacking in this, or there is not sufficient compassion in this budget. Because whenever a need is there for, let's say, increasing salaries due to overtime, you have the back door, which is the increases in the electricity rates and in the taxes on that electricity, which then allows you to run a deficit on the general fund. And so who pays? The individuals who are on fixed income, the individuals who are on disability, and I think that it's unfair and it lacks compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Barry, Mr. Draymond.
Just for the record, Mr. Milano, any divine intervention during budget study sessions could only help, I think.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and the public. By the way, the technical term for promotional items is trash and trinkets. Okay, keep that in mind. It's trash and trinkets. This is from the head of one of the largest trash and trinket companies in the Midwest. So that's the name of it. I'm actually going to talk relative to the budget that I think we're seeing the potential of processes being put in place, and I think that's good. I think that by listening more to the public and us doing our best to get more people to speak out on these issues, I think you're realizing that there are metrics that can be used to help you make your decisions in where to spend the money, and that's good. I think that the budget study sessions should start earlier so that you can better track the individual departments and have them specify what their needs are, and for you to say, hey, that fits in with our vision for what this council wants to do. And I think that's important. As I mentioned several times, former Mayor Sheldon Baker said, the budget is your vision. Let it be your vision. Don't let it be the staff's vision. When you make these decisions, let them be yours. Don't color with the rhetoric. Don't color with the checks that have come in for the last 3 or 4 election cycles to put people in office that didn't get them this time. Look at the monies that you get, set them aside. Look at the needs of the public. Measure what the public wants. Listen to the public. As you know, the one of the issues that I brought up had to do with questionable things on a part of a budget that could have been resolved at a much earlier stage. It could have been resolved within that department. It could have been resolved within the finance department. It could have been resolved within the city manager's department, even though it's a 1,000-page document. So that could have been resolved with the proper information placed in the budget for the public's use. Remember, it's not just you. It's the public. Now, I understand from reading the materials that we won't see the real budget until 3 or 4 months. And by the way, I do want to mention one thing, and you may want to talk to the Women's Commission about this, that with the libraries asking $40,000 for a mail, M-A-L-E, delivery service. So is that a sexist thing or what? That was in your document you received, earlier today from the general fund. But I thought we had to end with just a little bit of comedy. Thank you very much. Mary Ellen.
Mr. Mayor, as far as I know, this vision does represent, the budget does represent my vision, not the staff's. At least that's what I'm going to be voting on.
Thank you.
Any more cards?
No, that's all the cards.
Is that the card? Hearing is closed.
If there's nothing else, if I haven't missed anyone's card, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, move 9A.
There's no motion.
There's no motion.
There's no motion.
Just public input.
I have a
Sorry,
question.
I withdraw my motion.
Mr. Youssef?
Mr. Aller? Who picked your tie?
If we don't have a motion.
I picked out my tie today.
That was my question.
Okay.
This is one of his less colorful ties.
Less
for
fancy.
stage.
Okay. I was just kidding you. I thought I've been asking you a lot of questions over the last many weeks and putting you on a hot seat. And I think you have tried your best to answer 99, if not 100% of my questions. You could sit down. I just don't need. As for myself, Mr. Mayor, I think a budget, maybe Mr. Weaver's thing. At this point, I'm not ready to vote for this budget. I don't think it reflects my vision or my constituency's vision. I'm going to hold my wait until next Tuesday on the 26th. We still have another study session, and I want to hear explanation from the fire department on the deal with their what is happening with their overtime, and give them the opportunity to explain to the public and to myself why there's a $5 million overtime. The other thing that I had issue with was we spent a lot of money. We gave out computers. We bought them hot dogs. We spent all this time discussing issues with the people about what is it you would like to see City Council do. That was our long-term planning. We took all the evidence through the website, through mail, through meetings, and the number one issue was, do I have to say it? Traffic. That was the number one issue. Traffic, mitigation of traffic. And I will tell you, I just don't get it. We get opportunities to put money into mitigating some of these traffic issues. Spend $1 million doing the study through the mobility, which I think was the best thing we ever did. I think it's the best thing that any council could do. That's why we won awards for. But awards don't mean anything to the driver that is out there on Glendale Avenue and is frustrated and is shaking his fist on the next door because he can't move. To me, I don't think our capital improvement budget was amended in such fashion that went along to deal with some of this. Now, I understand we're going to have to come back later and discuss this stuff and maybe put some of these things and amend this and all that stuff. But I would have liked to start this budget hearing earlier. I am hoping that next year we will start it earlier. I'm sorry that I spoke so long, and some of my colleagues are upset that I asked too many questions, I do too much. But you know what? I'm not accountable to my colleagues. I'm accountable to those 8,200 people who voted for me and the rest of the 190,000 who didn't. So that to me is important. That's what on this diet. My job is to do everything I can, understand this budget, ask all the questions, make sure the public listens to what the questions were and what the answers were, because, believe it or not, there are a lot of people out there who are wondering the same thing that I am wondering. And so in the end of the day, yes, Mr. Milano, Mr. Barry Allen, a budget needs to be a reflection of not just what I want. I, as Bob Yusefian, is irrelevant. I need to represent my people, the people of Glendale. So my job is to make sure this budget represents their values and what they want, not what I want. Doesn't matter what I want. In many cases, my wife doesn't care what I want. But that's where I am coming from. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yusefian.
Next.
We ready to move on to item 9B?
9B is Director of Public Works regarding revision of refuse collection fees. At 9B1 is a resolution increasing fees.
And who's going to Mr. Zern, Mr. Mayor? Mr. Zern?
Excuse me, pardon me. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as we do each year with all of our enterprise or business funds, in the course of compiling the budget, we look at both of our expenditure needs for the year, our revenues that are coming in, and then we review the fees that generate the required revenue for these operations to exist and to function properly. This year we did that as usual and came away with the fact that the refuse fund was in need of a rate increase to meet the demands put on it, either operational demands, as I'll call them, including labor and maintenance and operation costs, regulatory requirements that we're faced with, capital needs, the replacement of course, as you are aware, this is an enterprise fund. It is, as I call, self-sufficient. It must pay its own way. It must repair its own buildings and grounds. It must replace its own equipment. It doesn't have an equipment replacement fund outside of the reserves that it generates. And then again, that fact, too, is to maintain a comfortable level of reserves in the fund to meet our operational needs, to meet any emergencies, and to continue to be able to fund our capital requirements. So in that case, when we looked at it this year with the number of notable issues that we faced both last year and that we're anticipating that we're going to face in this next year, we're recommending a 7% increase. Some of those notables, we faced higher fuel costs over the last year than we anticipated. We had a tipping fee being the cost per ton that we pay to dispose of refuse at Shoal Canyon. We had an increase on January 1st of 07. We will have another increase on January 1st of 08. In addition to that, I've just been notified within the last 30 days that the county is proposing an additional 64 cents per ton for their solid waste fee. They're in a public hearing phase right now, taking input, but it's more than likely that will occur. There is state legislation pending, and I took a sidebar with our lobbyist to ask, state legislation pending to put a 50-cent per ton charge on all tonnage deposited in California to pay for, believe me, it's not our operation, it'll pay for off-road equipment used in landfilling and recycling operations. In other words, it's for the landfill operators to convert their equipment to CNG or other alternative fuel. We're paying our own freight when it comes to that. They now want to assess a fee so that they can pay their conversion to that type of fuel. The other thing is, we are converting to CNG. Those capital costs are more than the traditional. Yes, Mr. Safian.
Off-road vehicles?
Off-road. Off-road is
like
considered to be water tenders, bulldozers, front loaders, and graders.
They make those in CNG?
They are required by CARB, California Air Resources Board, to convert those.
Yikes.
Do they? My thinking is that most of those are powered by the largest of Caterpillar engines, and they don't have a CNG engine at this time. So it'll be interesting to see. It may be reformulated diesel that they go to, or other types of filtration systems to do that. On the CNG, there's only one manufacturer of the CNG engine of which we are required to put into our trucks. There was 3 at the beginning of the year, 2 have bowed out. John Deere is gone, Detroit Diesel is gone, Cummins is the last company. They just notified us that they're raising the cost of the engine. And I can guarantee you there won't be any aftermarket parts manufacturer, so we will be paying top dollar for parts as well. Those are just some of the dilemmas that we face in the fund, and that is the reason we've come back to request a 7% increase. As I've said before, we take this very seriously. We believe that that is what we need to get through the next year. We evaluate each year individually. I think you'll see in our survey that we fare very well when compared to others in LA County and Orange County as far as our rates, and we're committed to keeping that rate as low as we can, but we do have some operational needs that we need to address. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any NPDES regulations come out of this fund?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Yusefian, we have with the trash TMDL that's part of the stormwater,
Right.
we have used funds in trying to address those, especially at the recycling center and the integrated waste yard.
Street sweeping?
Street sweeping comes out of this fund as well.
Okay, and all the trash collection we do throughout the city, for the city itself?
This fund includes refuse collection, the collection of recyclables and green waste. It includes street sweeping. It includes the maintenance of the landfills we're responsible for. That's Shoal Canyon Inactive Landfill and Brown Park Landfill. We have regulatory requirements. With that said, it includes the operation of the recycling center, bulky item collection, and all of our electronic waste collection, and any other recycling programs that we have in place.
Steve, do we get any revenue on the recycling?
Yes, we do.
Was it significant?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it is. We probably are up to somewhere in the neighborhood of about $800,000 a year in our revenue off of recyclable materials. And we also generate revenue from private haulers working in Glendale. As part of AB 939, we have the ability to levy what we call gross receipts fees to them, and we do that at a rate right now of 15%. I think I mentioned during budget study sessions that I'd be coming back to you to review that and possibly increase it, but we generate another $1 million from that per year.
Do you anticipate losing any customers? Is this only the residential, or is it a commercial multifamily as well?
Mr. Mayor, it's across the board. It's all customers.
Do you anticipate losing any customers because of the price issue, the price comparison versus the competitors, the private industry that takes
Mr. Mayor, I'd say no. There is the occasional customer that will lose. The private sector is not extremely competitive with us. We have about 85% of the multifamily is defined as 5 units or more. We have about 85% of that. We've held that 85 to 86% in the 21 years I've been here.
And yet, Steve, those folks can choose, right?
They can choose.
They can go to a private
absolutely.
hauler.
Absolutely, they can choose. We handle some of the hardest accounts in the city. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The private sector has a tendency to take away from us those accounts which are easy to serve. The multifamily buildings in this community, there is a lot of subterranean parking. That's not an easy account to serve. We're able to serve that account and still keep their rates low.
So what you've told me, essentially, that the main components of the increased costs are the gas, energy costs, which have increased.
Correct.
Conversion to CNG.
Correct.
Tipping fees.
Correct. Also labor costs, Mr. Mayor.
Labor costs. Have we looked for any efficiencies and ways to efficientize our...
Yes, Mr. Mayor, each year, as an exercise, we go through to look at our efficiency measure, implementation of efficiency measures, I think we look each year at our routing to see how we can better route our vehicles. In some cases, I think we've got it down to a pretty good routing system right now. But in the past, I will tell you, by doing this, going through this exercise, we've been able to reduce a truck, for instance. We were able to collect what we had been doing with 12 trucks, doing it with 11 trucks. So we go through that exercise regularly. We went to all automated collection, which was a great efficiency gain for us in our operations. We've traditionally run a very lean operation here. I will say this publicly, anytime, any place, anywhere. This is the hardest working group of men and women that in my department and in this city, they go out every day and do a job that's not the most desirable job in the world, but they do it well. And the low rates that the citizens of Glendale experience is reflective of the hard work that they do. And we've kept their staffing levels pretty lean. We've kept our truck fleet pretty lean. We push our equipment very hard, all in an attempt to try to keep this rate as low as we can for the residents, and at the same time continue to give them that top quality service.
Thank you. Let's hear from Margaret Hammond, followed by Herbert Milano.
Mr. Mayor, while Mrs. Hammond and others are coming up to address the council as part of this public hearing, the record should reflect that pursuant to Proposition 218, the appropriate notice was mailed to all of the residents and customers of the city of Glendale, and we received, Mr. Zern, approximately 14, was it?
Correct. No, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Howard, we have 15 written protests. 15
written protests.
Which I will give to Mr. Kasakian to enter into the record.
And I don't know if the city clerk directly received any protests.
We have not.
Only 15 protests have been received, and those will be part of the record.
I will open the public hearing, but I did receive an email. I forget the gentleman's name. Who was not objecting and was in favor of the modest increase.
We appreciate that, but as
Did you
Mr.
get
Howard
that
said,
one?
under Proposition 218, specifically requires...
the last name was Zern?
I couldn't stay anonymous.
Related?
But under Prop 218, the written comments drive that, and if you have a majority, it's 50% plus one, I believe, Mr. Howard.
50% plus.
That would negate the increase. So having 15, just to give you an example, 50% would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 36,000. We have about 72,000 customers.
So we don't have to count.
Well below the threshold.
Thank you. Margaret.
Hello. Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff.
And I'm opening the public hearing.
My remarks are, I've made this same complaint before, the same remark before. Number one, these fees that you're increasing, I don't know how many of the people out there realize that people who live in apartment houses, if they're owners of those apartment houses, pay for bins for the trash, which I happen to do, but that also the tenants pay. It's a double dip deal here, man. Now, how many apartments are in Glendale? How many apartments? Can somebody tell me the number? Anybody? How many apartment units there are in Glendale?
How many units?
And if you take all of that and multiply it by that amount that they're being charged for the trash, and they're not using the service.
You mean you hire a private company?
No, I
Glendale?
have the city of Glendale that I pay a bin, which it has increased quite a bit over the last few years. I mean, I think it was maybe $22.50 or something when I started. Now it's up to, what, $52 or $55. But what I'm saying, if I don't know whether the people, I know my tenants, it's one thing they question me. And I said, oh, well, no, I pay for the trash bin. Well, then why are we being charged for trash? I have never gotten an answer. I believe the person that was sitting there before Mr. Zern, I asked that same question, and I was told that, well, it's in case you don't have a bin, then we need to know that the trash will be picked up. The tenants need to know that they have that backup, that I can go. So, in other words, if I refuse to pay, I don't want the bin anymore. I'm not going to bother with it. Then those people, each one of them, will be entitled to 2 bins. They'll be entitled to one, three. They won't have the green one because the green one will be, but maybe they could have. So that would be, for instance, in my apartments, would be a total of 12 extra trash cans that would have to be brought out and picked up by the city, rather than just the one bin that I pay for. Now, I've always objected to that. I think it's a double dipping. And I'm saying if that money is not, that effort, that service is not being given, then where is that money going for not picking up the trash? right? From those, I don't know, how many units are there? Say 50,000 units in Glendale of apartment units, right? It's just an interesting point. The other thing I'd like to ask, is, the 5-cent charge that you get on for bottles and cans, or 10-cent for large ones, I know it's California. Does the city of Glendale get any kickback from that amount of money?
Back is such a bad word to use.
Well, okay, whatever.
Rebate.
From that? I'd like to know that also.
800,000.
Thank you. 2 questions?
Oh, no, but I thought that was on the refuse, that was on recycle, it's recycled, but not, I'm talking about, soda cans and bottles.
The redemption.
Bottles, yeah.
Redemption, yeah.
Goes into a state fund.
Okay.
First question.
You don't get any part of it then? We don't get
Well,
any
let's
part of it.
let him answer it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not sure what the answer.
Oh, because
Mr. Mayor.
I heard Mr.
Well, I know he wanted to answer it, but we're going to ask Mr.
Oh.
Zern to answer it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the first question is in an apartment situation, each of the tenants will be charged what we call the basic rate. That's the basic refuse rate, and it varies depending on how many units. And if the landlord has the bin, the landlord pays the bin charge, because that's a separate charge for the rental of the bin. So that's where you get into the landlord paying a bin charge and the tenants paying for the service fee, the basic rate that virtually everybody in the city pays.
Excuse me, I pay for pickup also. That bin,
Hold on, Margaret.
that's what it says.
Hold on, Margaret.
Once again,
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, she's had the answer. She hasn't liked the answer, but the same
That's
answer was
okay.
given.
It isn't that I don't like it, I'm just saying
Hold on, let's
facts.
not get
Doesn't agree
back
with
and
it.
forth, Margaret. It's
The second question is, yes, there is a California redemption value. Our recycling company, Allen, who runs our center, pays to the folks coming in a higher rate than that redemption rate for at a minimum they pay you that, but generally they pay a higher rate. And then we, in the contract we have with them, get a higher rate as well from the tonnage collected. So they, Allen Company, eventually get the redemption value through the state, but we make more money than the redemption value. And we also then go through a grant program every year. I call it a grant program, they call it a grant program, yet it's almost become automatic where we apply for the number of, or the tonnage of bottles and cans that we take in through the recycling center, and we get a certain amount of money through that. So we actually end up making more than if we just simply redeemed it for what the California redemption value is.
And Steve, how much revenue do we generate off our recycling program?
About $800,000 a year.
Thank you.
and that goes to offset the costs of
That goes into the fund, yes.
Back to the refuse fund.
That's something we consider when we're looking at our revenues and expenditure projections.
Mr. Yusefian.
But when I go and buy 6-pack of Coca-Cola in a bottle, there's a redemption value that I pay at the supermarket. In turn, the supermarket takes that money and gives it to the state of California.
Correct.
Now, how much of that the state actually gives back in redemption? I heard some numbers in like 30%. Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Yusefian, I've heard that same thing. I can't verify how the state is paying that out. We've always gone by the fact that if there's formulas, obviously, because when you're talking about bottles and aluminum cans, of the volume that we take in, or the volume any major recycler takes in, you actually convert it through the tonnage. My assumption is you're getting the redemption value for the number of cans. I've heard that same thing, Mr. Yusefian. I have never seen it verified or validated.
Is there a way to verify it? I mean, there must be, somebody has a budget somewhere.
Well, the state goes through an audit. I don't know what the procedure, or I don't know what the intervals for that audit are. And then the state in turn audits, because I'm sure many of you have seen before when you've had situations where people were dumping glass and things like that.
We can't get any of that money?
I can look, any of the money?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a report just in the past few months that there is a certain percentage of the bottles and plastic and glass that are redeemable that, of course, don't get redeemed. They don't end up in a recycling yard. They end up in a landfill somewhere. As a result, the report, as I recall, a rather large amount of money, in excess of $100 million, had accumulated in a state fund where essentially the deposits go and the deposits come back out when things are redeemed and the balance stays there if a bottle ends up in a landfill. And this article I read had to do with the squabbling that was going on in the state over the application and use of those monies. So it's out there someplace. We can probably find the report on the balance of what's in that fund.
Well, that's one of the items maybe we should ask our legislatures, our consultants, to go back and try to figure out a way to create a grant so it could be used to maybe convert some of those off-road vehicles that are being taken care of, to convert those things to more green use. That's what it's for.
I will mention that.
Leave it up to the state. Hell, they'll blow it on some crazy thing.
That grant program I spoke of earlier that we apply for every year, that does come out of the same redemption fund. As
so
well.
maybe they.
So there is some, but as Mr. Starbird said, there's controversy over how much of that's coming back, and there is unfortunately a large stream that doesn't go through a recycling process but goes directly to the landfills.
I have one more card, Herbert Milano.
Mayor Najarian, members of the City Council, City staff, my name is Herbert Milano. Well, I commend Mr. Cern for what I believe is a good department or section that provides an essential service that has always been the pride of Glendale. Clean streets, efficient pickup. What my concern is the manner in which the information is presented to the public. Basically, if I recall correctly, the letter that I received says, due to fuel increases of 17%, we need to make an adjustment of your fees. But my question really is, of the total increase, what percentage of that was fuel? What percentage of that was labor? What percentage of that was benefit and pensions? How much is the actual landfill? How much is equipment upgrade? So that we can get a true representation of what the costs are. Because from reading that document, it just implies that the things that we relate to, which are fuel increases, is the reason for the increase. And I'd rather have a little bit better transparency there. The other issue I have is that it also doesn't address some of the other goals that we should have. If we should promote recycling, right, then how is our recycling moving forward as opposed with regard to as a percentage of the total trash and tonnage that is being picked up? Are we aiming to recycle 5% of it, 10% of it, 15% of it? What's our goal? So that then we can relate that the amount of money that goes into it is approaching or going towards those objectives. And the last point that I want to make is with regard to where are the incentives that we would give tenants so that they can actually recycle, right? So that they can actually, induce them into reducing the amount of trash that eventually goes into a landfill. In other words, what are we doing to extend the life of the landfill ourselves? And do we reach those objectives? I would love to see, whenever we get an increase, sort of results with regard to major objectives that we would have towards reducing our trash and increasing our recyclable materials. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I could, and I think I'm addressing the questions Mr. Milano has. I have the letter in front of me that I sent out. It states specifically that we've experienced a 17% increase in fuel over the last year, a 9% increase in landfill disposal costs, and it indicates that the conversion of our diesel fleet to CNG is estimated to cost $300,000. In addition, and as you're aware, and Mr. Milano may not be aware, as far as how much are we recycling or diverting, we're required by law to divert 50% every year at a minimum. We certainly want to do a lot more than that, but we have no choice but to meet the mandate of the law. That is also clearly stated in the letter. Refuse fees also enable the implementation of environmental programs to meet the state of California AB 939 mandate, which requires the city to divert no less than 50% of its waste stream from the landfill. We certainly could get into more detail about exactly what programs we have in place and what percentage of diversion we get from those programs. But the letter that we do send out to every ratepayer states, at least to that degree that I've just quoted to you, where those increases. It's not a willy-nilly, we're charging you 7%, we've had an increase in costs, boom. So we do try to spell it out with a little more detail than that.
Mr. Quintero.
And the $300,000 is going to buy us what, Mr. Cern?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Quintero, and I will have to make a comment about the report. There is a typo in there because At the top, it quotes an $800,000 figure, and later in the background, $300,000. It's actually $800,000. I'll explain the breakdown. The $300,000, to answer your question, is the difference between the purchase of 7 diesel trucks and 7 CNG trucks. Today, the cost on an individual truck is somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000. Our hope is that by buying 7 at one time, we'll get a better bid. So I'm estimating more along the lines of $45,000 extra per truck. That may go down in flames because, as I said, the single truck engine manufacturer seems to be quite content now that they have the market. And they're beginning to squeeze.
But that 60,000 is just the chassis, correct? I mean, that's not all of the.
It's Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Quintero. It's essentially the engine. It's essentially the drivetrain.
Yeah.
That's costing you more. There is obviously cost increases each year with chassis, and refuse trucks are very interesting. You buy the chassis, and we bid it to a single vendor, but the chassis is bought separately, the truck bed is bought separately, the engine is bought separately, and the transmission is bought separately because we spec out different component parts different ways. But just to go back and finish off the statement, that $300,000 is for the actual rolling stock equipment. The additional $500,000, and I spoke to this a little bit during our budget study sessions, that's the refuse fund's share of the cost to upgrade the fleet maintenance facilities so that we can work on the vehicles inside. I explained the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, air handling, those kind of things. So just a clarification on that.
Because of the CNG.
Because of the CNG, yes. To bring those inside, health and safety codes require us to retrofit the facility.
Is the public
Thank
hearing
you.
closed?
That is the last card, and I will close the public hearing. Mr. Isafian.
Mayor, before I move the item, I think for public to know this, it's important. In many times when we want to compare ourselves when it comes to fire, police, or whatever else, especially when it comes to the pay and so on and so forth, we compare ourselves to many cities. I just wanted to read the amounts of the money that different cities pay for trash. Burbank is $31.83. Pasadena is $31.39. Inglewood is one of the rare ones that is lower than us, and that's $11.78. Long Beach is $20.25. Santa Monica is $36.48. Torrance is $20.79. Anaheim is $17.35. Garden Grove, $18.22. We did not have a number from Huntington Beach. Santa Ana, $15.34, and that is the second one that is lower than our proposal, which is $16.96. Just want to let you know that Los Angeles, that for many, many years did not charge 1 penny, Los Angeles is charging $33.45. So I just wanted people to know what the other cities are charging. It's not that we are overcharging, so you have those numbers. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I would move the item.
Second.
There's no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. What's next, Mr. Kasai?
Is there any new business?
No new business.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.